This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Morning. It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm a big fan of institutions, as you know. I think that the bad stuff happens when people in power start undoing things that have been put in place to protect the population. You can hear it happening a lot at the moment with human rights. There's a fundamental misunderstanding among people who think that they're opposed to human rights. And it's a misunderstanding that's best expressed by the fact that they appear to have forgotten that they're humans. So protecting everybody sometimes involves protecting people who you don't think deserve protection. But that's the point about the use of the word human, or universal, if you prefer, universal human rights. A very good example at the moment in British political discourse of how easy it is to persuade people to oppose something that is literally designed and successfully to protect them. But not every institution, not every exercise of law and regulation is going to be, by definition, a positive thing. Again, for risk of reaching for the extremities, the people that hid Anne Frank and her family from the Nazis in Amsterdam were breaking laws, breaking rules. The people who dobbed them in and consigned them to the death camps were obeying laws. They were acting legally. So it is silly to suggest or even to think that all laws or rules or regulations are good things. Nonetheless, in this country at this time, I find it much easier, and it's a bit of an odd position for a phone-in host to take, traditionally, although I'm going to have to stop saying that because I've been doing this for so long. The traditions have changed. Usually you're supposed to attack the verdicts handed down by judges, and you're supposed, if you don't like them, regardless of the fact that you weren't in court and you heard none of the evidence, and you invite people to ring in and agree with you that the law is an ass and that these flipping out of touch judges don't know what they're talking about, and you amplify completely made up or horribly exaggerated stories about people being granted asylum because of their child's affection for chicken nuggets, not mentioning at all that the chicken nuggets angle is just an example of pretty hardcore autism that would prevent that child from leading any sort of life in a country less advanced on that front than ours is. But that's all by the by. I don't normally like phone-ins or ideas about attacking the professionals and the experts who are doing their job. I think it's really silly. You saw what happened when Michael Gove told us to ignore the experts or told us that we'd had enough of experts. It's usually a wonderful tactic for people who hate reality. I suppose the apotheosis, if you like, of what can happen politically when people ignore experts and indeed ignore reality is unfolding on the other side of the Atlantic at the moment. Pretty much the only political illusion I'm going to be confident enough to make today, given the rather, as Nick described them, arcane rules and laws governing what we can and can't say on the radio when there are elections underway. No rules or laws, of course, governing what newspapers can do or say. We'll make sense of it one day. 7 minutes after 10 is the time. Which brings me to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, which we obviously need. You know, you can't have anybody really marking their own homework. Imagine if I got to decide on which Ofcom complaints about me were upheld and which Ofcom complaints about me were rejected. Or imagine if my boss got to decide. Imagine if LBC got to decide. It's not a million miles away from how things work at the BBC, actually. But oddly enough, they sometimes self-flagellate more violently than an outsider would actually punish them. You look at the actions, or you look at the rationale behind the existence of the Independent Office of Police Conduct, and you think, well, it's very important that we have that. And then you come to this case. I made a point when we were first talking about the killing of Chris Kaba, correctly described as a gangster. I don't know why anyone would object to that, but people do. I'm not going to apologise to you for using that word because it is absolutely accurate. I made a conscious choice not to repeat the name of the police officer involved. I don't know whether that was a little bit silly. I said to you at the time, this might be a little bit daft, but I just felt that him and his family, particularly after the acquittal on murder charges, probably didn't want to hear his name being pumped out from the airwaves endlessly. I don't know if we can sustain that today, because the story has moved on quite considerably overnight. Well, not overnight. It moved on yesterday while we were on air. And it has moved to a place where, despite that acquittal, cleared of the murder of Chris Kaba, he will now face allegations of gross misconduct relating to the shooting in South London in September 2022. And I find this really tricky. I'm not going to lie to you. My heart really recoils at this news. The idea that this officer is going to go through another nightmare, which could culminate not in his loss of liberty, which is what, of course, the criminal charges could have delivered, but in his loss of livelihood. It seems to be a very real and present possibility. If he is found guilty of gross misconduct, then, as I understand it, it would become increasingly difficult for him to stay in the force. I have a strange relationship with the police. If you've been listening to this programme for a long time, you will know. Sometimes I upset my natural political allies by siding with them. I think they do a really difficult job in dangerous circumstances. And sometimes I upset them and their somewhat more myopic supporters by reminding you of the findings into institutional racism, institutional misogyny, and the irrefutable evidence of some appalling practices going on, both from officers on duty and officers, quotes, bantering, end quotes, on WhatsApp groups and in the police canteen. It's funny, isn't it? That if you're completely open-minded and honest, then sometimes you will agree with a cause or a constituency, and sometimes you will disagree with it. Sometimes you will be on the side of a given group of people, and sometimes you will be opposed to them. What is it that bloke said about having a mind? There's no point having a mind if you never change it. Which I spent years thinking I'd come up with. Well, about 2 years thinking I'd come up with, but it turned out Edward de Bono had said it many, many moons before it even occurred to me, shortly before he founded U2. I'm joking. It's 10 after 10. And here's the bit I don't get. So, this isn't a criticism of anybody who's asked this question. Is there any point in you and me pontificating on whether or not he should be facing gross misconduct charges? I mean, the Independent Office of Police Conduct literally exists to make these decisions. Isn't it a little bit like asking whether or not if someone dies in hospital and there are questions surrounding how it happened and no one is guilty of murder? Like, for example, if Lucy Letby had been acquitted, would we not still want an investigation into how those deaths had happened? And whether or not every dot and comma had been observed? I don't know. This is where I'm struggling this morning, because I don't fully understand why you need both. And if I was an armed police officer, and as far as I can tell, we don't have enough of them, I think I'd really struggle to go to work today with my gun. I really do. I think you can tell from the way I'm trying to set this conversation up that I'm really torn between thinking that this feels wrong and recognising usually the absolute importance, the necessity of the primacy of institutions. You need an independent office of police conduct because, generally speaking, if the police are left to mark their own homework, they won't do a bang-up job. They won't do it as honestly or as transparently. But the fact that he has been cleared of murder charges and that there is no criminal heft to these allegations, I mean, can I call it an HR issue? If it's not criminal, if it gross misconduct, but there's absolutely no criminal heft to it, there's no question whatsoever of this being escalated to criminal charges. That ship has sailed. I don't quite understand what this is supposed to do or what this is designed to do. Is that a bit silly of me, do you think, to say it's like very, very serious HR issues? I know somebody died, and I'm not in any way making light of that, but he has been cleared of the allegation of murder. So what is left? Allegations of gross misconduct. Why would you expose him him to this investigation and his colleagues to the suspicion that that their job is becoming increasingly difficult to do? And I don't normally buy into the lazy tropes during topics like this. I don't like to, because I try not to be lazy when I'm with you. I think there's enough chatter out there that involves people who don't like thinking about things, let alone understanding them, offering up very pungent opinions on all manner of subjects, and that is a practice that has led us into a lot of the trouble that the country currently faces. So I don't like the lazy tropes, but I don't like this story either. I don't like this decision. I don't understand fully this decision to pass the investigation downwards to gross misconduct allegations. So perhaps coppers can explain it to me. I want to know why we need this. 0345 6060 973. I don't. So that's to start. I don't know if this will take us all the way up to 11. As I've said, I don't know quite how we're supposed to have strong opinions on something that we don't understand. I mean, people are already asking me what the definition of gross misconduct is. I don't understand why you are still on the hook, as it were, for your behaviour if you've been acquitted by the highest court in the land. I don't fully grasp that. There will be people listening who do, and you are the people I want to ring in first. Why is this happening? Because even if I phrase it differently, if I say, why does this have to happen, I shut down my own reservations. Why does this have to happen? The answer might be, well, I don't think it does have to happen. You got Bernard Hogan-Howe on with Nick Ferrari saying, I don't think it does have to, it should not be happening. A former commissioner, a senior police officer in the country. So lots of people who know a lot more about these things than I do seem to be of the view that it shouldn't be happening. Our new crime correspondent, Andy Hughes, has spoken to one of his colleagues, one of the police officer's colleagues, and made it pretty clear that this decision to escalate the gross misconduct hearing will put public safety at risk, in his opinion. NX121, he was known as. I think I'll carry on calling him that for now, unless you make a strong case as to why I shouldn't. But he's made a very strong case in his interview with Andy for why we should be concerned about a possible diminution in the number of firearms officers on the streets. We all hoped it would be over, he said, but now the decision is going to affect firearms officers, which, again, you respond to with your head and your heart. So your heart goes, oh, that's an unalloyed bad. That's awful. We need armed officers on the streets, not least because there seem to be more armed criminals around than before. But then your head goes, well, okay, but what if he has done gross misconduct? What are we supposed to do? What message does that send to armed officers? All right, you're not guilty of murder, but you've broken all sorts of rules that you were told about in training, and you're scot-free. You can waltz away over the horizon. Don't worry. Do you see what I mean? Am I going mad, or is this actually a lot more complicated than some of the coverage allows? So we'll begin with that question. Is this necessary? Not is this right or is this wrong, but is this necessary? And who can answer that? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Is this necessary? And it doesn't really matter what you think happened on that night, because the footage of Chris Kaba trying to elude the police cordon was the justification for the acquittal, for the clearing on the charge. One of the justifications for the clearing, and information that was known to the police but wasn't known to us when we first started talking about it, about the car that he was in and events that the car had been previously involved with. That this isn't a debate about the rights and wrongs of the murder charges or the murder acquittal. It's a debate about the rubric, the detail. The why does this man, who has endured pretty terrible experiences, albeit he's not the one that got shot. I don't think you shoot someone, even with justification and just turn the page and move on to another day unaffected by it, untroubled by it. But is it necessary to do this? I kind of, again, I'm sorry that I keep going on about my head and my heart. You tune in for pungent opinions, ideally ones that are built on careful consideration and understanding. But my heart says this is awful, this is unfair, this is wrong. And my head says, and my head is a lot quieter than my heart this morning, which isn't necessarily a good thing. And my head says, well, you might not like it, but it's the only system of checks and balances that we have. And if the only system of checks and balances that we have have delivered a decision that this needs to happen, then this needs to happen. 0345 60 973. Tell me why you think this is necessary, or indeed why you think it isn't. And remember, if you think it's necessary but still undesirable, then you're probably closer to where I am at the moment than not. It's 10:19.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 10 is the time. I quite like this, and I don't like it, but I think it's helpful. I like it in that sense. Let me read it to you and see whether you agree. I get it right. Hypothetically, this is from Tom. If you talked about something political today, and charges were brought against you, albeit only by Ofcom, but you were acquitted because it was determined that you didn't intend to do it, then you don't get into any trouble with the regulator. However, it is Global's policy, that's my employer, that you are not supposed to comment on anything political today, regardless of intention. I've also got form. Tom very kindly doesn't add that, but I do actually have form in this department. So he goes on, in that instance, you could be disciplined by your employer for gross misconduct for failing to follow a company policy and bringing the organisation into disrepute, but you wouldn't have had the complaint upheld by the regulator. It's not a brilliant analogy, but it's certainly a good one. And Tom concludes that is what this is. The IOPC clearly believe that the threshold has been reached for an investigation, that events have potentially breached a policy, or that his actions have somehow brought the force into disrepute. So however hard it is for him, if they ignored this, then we'd all be up in arms about police corruption. And an investigation doesn't mean he's guilty or will be dismissed. They may, of course, find in his favour having followed due process. Andrew's in Bishop Stortford. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Hi there. Oh gosh, how do you manage to steal people's thunder so easily?
Tom,
basically. No, I know it was Tom actually, not yourself. Right. Great, first time actually on your show. So thanks very much for this.
Welcome.
Brilliant. This is the point. Basically, the thing I'm going to add to it is that ideally none of this would be public. If you're accused of gross misconduct, your colleagues. Although some may know, but your colleagues and the public don't know. They don't know. No,
but if it comes after you've been in court charged with murder, it's going to be very hard to keep your identity secret.
That's the catch-22, isn't it, in this situation? So. Yeah, so really it seems almost deeply over the top unfair and harsh and whatever else. But yes, I think probably a policy has been, not followed, or, has been broken, or, there's something that this chap, which I don't know the details of, to be honest, he's basically probably or could well have stepped over the mark in terms of that. So he's facing an allegation of gross misconduct. And that's what employers do.
It went to court, which means that the decision to prosecute him was based upon, and I'm grateful to one of my Blue Sky correspondents, Legal Claret, for this, a quote, reasonable prospect of conviction. And no one involved in the trial, the judge, the CPS, because the case went to jury, has decided that was incorrect, that decision was incorrect, that there was no reasonable prospect of conviction. So if there was a reasonable prospect of conviction on the murder charge, then the lower standard, the balance of probability on gross misconduct charges is almost certainly met. It doesn't mean the panel is going to decide one way or the other, but it means the threshold for this inquiry, this element of investigation, has been met. And that leads you to the question of whether or not there's any case at all for saying that this is such a febrile issue, and he has already had the trauma of a murder case, that they should somehow lower the bar. They should heighten the threshold for investigation. And emotionally, I could be in favour of that, but intellectually, or indeed as upholders of laws and rules, I don't think anybody could make that argument, really. He's been through so much, they should give him a break.
Yeah, well, you can't really. I mean, okay, that may be our human response to it, and with our empathetic response and so on. But I mean, the fact is that we don't know quite what rule was broken for the gross misconduct charge, and that's why actually it should be kept, confidential. So we don't know what rule that is, and it's a different thing to the legal charge.
Very much
it's just a different thing.
Very much so.
So you can't. It's apples and oranges. You can't really compare them.
And yet the
different.
ease with which you could slip into the certainty that this is wrong and unfair is all over the media today. It's pretty clear to see. And Andrew, thank you. And of course, I would welcome somebody who can firm up that slide into certainty that this is wrong. I'd quite like, and I know some people won't like me for this, but I would quite like to feel more confident in the opinion that this is the wrong thing to happen. It must be quite nice not to think about things much and just to pick an opinion and then stick to it regardless of what happens. But on this occasion, what is the point of having an independent office of police conduct if it doesn't investigate allegations of misconduct when a threshold has been met? And as Legal Claret points out, if the threshold for criminal charges, murder charges, has been met, it would have involved a conclusion that there was a reasonable prospect of conviction. And if there's a reasonable prospect of conviction on murder charges, then there is obviously a reasonable prospect of gross misconduct, which is immeasurably lower on the sort of tariff of wrongdoing. Ian is in Selhurst. Ian, what would you like to say?
I wanted to say probably similar to your previous caller.
Okay.
I'm an ex-police officer, and what it is I think what's happened is the fact that this IOPC investigation is going on probably has been lapse in regards to its release.
Right.
These things always happen. So he's probably being investigated for something that had happened either prior or after it had happened, but it was in slight connection. It could be anything. Let's just go. It could be a stupid WhatsApp message that went off,
you think so?
off after the incident. It could be anything.
Right.
But that's what they're investigating, not the criminal stuff. Now, I don't think that it should have been released that they're investigating it. And actually, I don't think that he should really be investigated. He's been put through far too much already.
Well, you can't have both of those. You can have one or the other. You can say, I've got absolutely no idea what he's been investigated for. It could be something trivial. But you can't then say, I don't think he should be investigated. You can only say that when you absolutely know what it is he's being investigated for. Surely, mate.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree with that.
Thank you.
But I think the fact that the fact it's got into the public eye, and it's being, not by LBC or whatever, you're just reporting on the news, but it's being pushed out there. I think there's a bit of political correctness. And as I say, I'm an ex-police officer and I'm mixed race.
Sure.
And I think that there is an element of race in regards to this as well. If it might not have hit the public the way it has if the whole race thing hadn't
you
been
can cut
involved.
this two ways, because I mean, if you're right, and we've got no way of knowing whether or not you are, and I'd probably put my money on that being unlikely, but I'm certainly not going to have a row with you about it today. But if you were right, then it would be the actions of a force that has been repeatedly found to be institutionally racist, working very hard to prove that they're not. So you could paint it in one of two ways. You could paint it as what you've decided to do, political correctness gone mad, or an institution that has been found to be institutionally racist, having to respond to the killing of a black man by a police officer from the institutionally racist police force differently from how it would if the force hadn't been found to be institutionally racist towards black people. So that's
absolutely.
Yeah, sorry.
It's absolutely right, because I can only comment on the Met. The Met are so fearful when they had the Leveson report through, and I actually joined the Met on the McPherson, and I actually joined the Met as a result of that.
But they weren't that fearful, because the current commissioner won't use the word institutional when he's describing the racism that the force is still riddled with.
Well, I used to work for the Met, and I'm the biggest supporter of the Met, and I personally wouldn't use the word institutionally racist. I think there are racist elements in it, but I don't think it's institutionally racist anymore.
But the people who conducted the last inquiry did.
I disagree.
And they saw all the
findings,
evidence. For that. You didn't.
Yeah.
But that's a conversation for another day. Is it head and heart for you? I mean, does this investigate? You might not like it, but until we actually know.
If I'm honest, I think sometimes the heart does sometimes overrule the head.
Of course it does.
I know that these decisions are so fine, and I think sometimes to keep these things out of the media keeps them completely clean and unmuddied.
I wonder whether that's timing, chronology. If he's already been on trial for murder, would it have been possible to keep the lid on a gross misconduct investigation, do you think?
If they hadn't, it might have been easier if they hadn't released his name. If the judge hadn't agreed to release his name, which again I think was an abhorrent decision.
We had a lot of phone-ins about that at the time. Can you remember what the rationale was? Is it the modern world that we live in, meaning that it would definitely be out there anyway?
It's because I thought that there was such fear about. I think there was. They believed it was in the public interest to release the name, but I can't actually remember the ruling of that.
No, I didn't like it at the time. I hear you. And the other thing that they chose to do after the verdict has come in was release the full details of Kaba's criminal past and his senior membership of a gang called 67 in Brixton Hill. So the judge, as we discussed at the time, is a fallible human being, and the information that's made available both to the court and to the public is in their gift. Police also revealing that he was the gunman in an assassination attempt of a gang rival in August of 2022. And of course, we're left with this idea that we may not like the investigation into gross misconduct, or we may like it, but the question of whether or not it has to happen, I think it's firming up as a yes, isn't it? You don't have to like it, but does it have to happen? Well, yes, it does. Should it have happened in secret? Slightly different question for a slightly different day, but if you're interested in what I think, then I agree with the last caller. It would probably have been preferable. It is 10:31. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. Mystery Hour on the way at 12, of course. We're also going to get one of our resident experts to cast an eye over reports that Ukraine and US and the US are signing a deal on the resources, not the deal Donald Trump demanded and not the ceasefire that he promised to deliver on day one of his presidency. So I hope that the word nothing burger, which is a fairly unpleasant word, but sometimes it fits the bill, doesn't pop up in the course of that conversation, but I would not personally be surprised if it did. 10:35 is the time. The rationale given by Judge Mark Lucraft when he lifted the anonymity order on Officer NX121, I don't know why. I think sometimes it's probably just stubbornness. I still prefer not to say the man's name out loud, even though everybody knows it and it's contained within our own news bulletins. But the anonymity order was lifted after media organisations challenged the legal application to protect his identity. So the legal application to protect his identity came after death threats were reportedly made against him. After the decision was made to reveal his identity, it was explained as a response to the necessity that the public has confidence in the criminal justice system. And that basis requires cases to be held wherever possible in public. So the judge, in his wisdom, and I think it is an individual decision, this, I don't think there's a great deal of precedent for it or guidelines. Again, I could be wrong if any High Court judges are listening. Well, I know lots of High Court judges are listening, but if any of you fancy ringing in because you're not too busy at the moment, then you can perhaps give me a steer on that if I'm wrong. The decision is in the hands of the judge, and he decided that there wasn't a strong enough case for keeping it secret because the necessity of holding cases in public wherever possible was more important. It took priority. So his name was revealed in court. And I think that makes it very difficult for his name not to be back in the public arena when a gross misconduct hearing begins to unfold. I just thought I'd clarify that, given that neither me nor the last caller could actually remember. And something else you should probably hear as well is our crime correspondent, new to the LBC team, but he's got a CV that most crime correspondents would be delighted to enjoy. Andy Hughes has joined the team quite recently, and he has spoken to exclusively one of the former colleagues of NX121 about the possible impact, the possible repercussions of this decision. He's I think it's at his first day, actually, so what an incredible scoop to kick things off with. Not just a former colleague, but also a friend of NX121. It's 10:37. Have a listen to this.
Martyn did something which is absolutely tragic. I'll rejoice in no person losing their life whatsoever. It was an unpalatable thing that we witnessed in Streatham on that night in September 2022. However, it was, although tragic, it was a case of Martyn acting in accordance with his training and doing his job to protect himself, his colleagues, and members of the public more generally. And that tends to get lost in the conversation, I fear. I think the IOPC need to be really careful as they seek to do a really important job and perform a really important social function, which is to hold policing to account, as I've said, and no police officer will doubt or underestimate the huge need for that. But where that becomes something which looks and feels more like a witch hunt, then officers will respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, it looks and sounds more like a witch hunt. I mean, the problem is, the best example I can ever think of when I'm saying this, well, you would say that, wouldn't you, that argument? Was that Christine Keeler that said that the first? I forget. Anyway, it's military. You will never, ever, ever have senior military saying, we've got more than enough money from the government. I mean, I think they are currently underfunded. Even a stop clock is right twice a day. But one of the first lessons I learnt in journalism was the fact that the military have never got enough money. They are always going to tell government, media, anyone listening that they haven't got enough money. They haven't got enough weapons. They haven't got enough warships. They haven't got enough planes. They haven't got enough bombs. They haven't got enough missiles. So a police officer is being put through the mangle after, in their eyes, doing his duty. They are almost always going to say this shouldn't be happening. But it's probably more nuanced than that. And certainly our ex-copper contributors so far would recognise that. It's just that they don't have quite the platform that former commissioners have, or that very senior people have, or that Andy has given there to his former colleague, to Officer NX121's former colleague. But it still feels rum, and I'm not entirely sure why. Ian is in Manchester. Ian, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I served in fire service for 30 years, and during the course of my service, I was driving an appliance to an incident. All lights going, all sirens going, and I passed through a red traffic light, and I collided with a car, and an innocent member of the public tragically died at the scene.
Oh, good Lord.
Now, I'll condense the story, but subsequently...
Take your time. I mean, you know, it's up to you, Ian.
Well, subsequently, I was charged with causing death by dangerous driving.
Right.
Which resulted in a trial in Crown Courts, at which I was found guilty. I was found not guilty.
It makes a bit of a difference. Oh, blimey, go on. I told you to take your time, Ian.
That was just pure nurse kicking. I got not guilty, James.
Of course it was. I hear you.
And this is like over a 12-month period. And then I returned to work, and it was made known to me that I would probably now be facing gross misconduct charges. Because it was deemed that I'd not driven in accordance with the guidelines in emergency fire appliance driving. So now gross misconduct normally does bring a dismissal from your employment. So it was only the groundswell of other drivers saying, if he gets charged with gross misconduct, we are not driving these fire engines anymore. Because like firearms officers, James, you don't get paid anymore.
No.
You know, it's a purely voluntary thing. And I was never charged with gross misconduct charges.
So the people power prevailed? The colleagues,
I don't think that would ever be admitted, but the rumours of gross misconduct charges, it just sort of dissolved. Away.
But are you saying that, I mean, because they're two quite different allegations, and you're almost saying, and I think an earlier caller came closer to this as well, that because of the stress of the criminal investigation, you should be spared the gross misconduct investigation. If the criminal charges hadn't been brought, you'd have had no particular beef, I don't think, with the gross misconduct investigation.
Probably not, actually.
That's what makes it tricky, you see.
It is tricky, but I do feel for the man in question.
Yes.
He's been through a lot, and he's probably got a lot more to go through.
Do you know what tariff you could have expected had you been found guilty? What did your lawyers think the likely sentence would be if things had gone the other way in court?
Well, causing death by dangerous driving at the time, I think the maximum was 14 years.
Right.
So you stood there one day as a firefighter doing your job, and a few months later he stood in the dock, and it's a hell of a place to be.
Of course it is.
But yeah, I
never get past that, do you? I mean, the knowledge that you entirely by accident, as both the court and your employers found, it's a terrible thing to live with.
Oh, you carry that, don't you? I mean, it's a total reversal of why you join an emergency service. You're there to help.
I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of that. Of course it is. The reason it feels a bit, I want to use a more powerful word than rum, but rum is the word I've got. And your position only enforces that feeling. It feels, as Amos has just said in a message to me on Blue Sky, it feels a little bit like double jeopardy. It feels like a second bite at the cherry of getting you, or in this case, Officer NX121, getting you guilty of something.
Yeah, I mean, I should imagine that men are under very strict guidelines of when they can discharge their weapons. I mean, we don't know if he's gone over the line regarding that.
Well, then that's the problem again. But the pendulum swings back, because the stricter the guidelines, the more important probably it is to ensure that the letter of the guidelines has been observed. And that's an incredibly helpful and I'm sure not a very easy call to make. So I'm extremely grateful to you. It's, I mean, and as you say quite rightly and very responsibly, no one would ever admit that the misgivings, if you like, of colleagues may have played a part in the decision, which was clearly taken in a much less public place than this decision would have been taken. The level of attention that your case received would not have been the same as this case for reasons that I hope are obvious. But it sits really powerfully alongside Andy Hughes' interview with one of Officer NX121's colleagues, essentially saying it shouldn't be going ahead, not least because it's going to have an impact on all firearms officers. And again, that can be true and still not a deal breaker. If I were a firearms officer, I would probably be thinking twice about A, going out with my gun today, and B, discharging it, even though I thought I was entirely within my rights to do so, because I'm looking at what's happened to my colleague. But that doesn't mean he shouldn't be facing gross misconduct charges. It just means I don't think I fancy the job anymore. It's a mess. And I think if we've proved anything today, and it's because of callers like Ian and the earlier callers as well, with experience on the force, I think it's not as straightforward as some people would have you believe. But hey, that's Britain, isn't it, in 2025? And speaking of Britain in 2025, another story in the news today, which fits into... Have you noticed what my favourite question is at the moment? Have you noticed what the question I'm getting into more and more stories? Have you noticed what... I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to build a little bit of tension over the course of the next hiatus. But whatever the subject is, if I found myself increasingly, and I don't know why, I found myself increasingly asking the same question about completely different stories. And today there's a story that actually means it's the only question you can ask, in a way. Are you sufficiently intrigued to stay tuned? Are you entertained? As Maximus asked.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:48 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And the question is, why Britain? I don't know if you've noticed this, but whatever we're talking about, the question I'm increasingly intrigued by, whether we're talking about, what was it earlier this week, ultra-processed foods and the fact that we eat more of them than other people do. Why are we different from other countries? What is it that happens here that explains our place in the charts, as it were? And there's a really grim story. I had a lovely time last night, a tribute at the BBC to the late Steve Wright, one of the absolute gods of DJing, or jocking, if you prefer. And it really brought home to me the role that radio plays in people's lives in a way that doesn't happen very often. It was a bit like being on Mount Olympus for radio gods in that room. You know, I sat next to Moyles. Tony Blackburn was there. Some of the big names from the past. Adrian Just was there. Everyone was there. It was an incredible evening. And it really reminded me of the power of radio and how important it is, even when, and this isn't really Steve's bag or wasn't really Steve's bag, but even when the news is bad, we have to enjoy each other's company. We have to cheer each other up a bit sometimes, don't we? And this story it's a weird one. It's about it's about how we in this country feel less meaning in our lives than almost every other country quiz. And it's the question I keep asking you. What is it about Britain that explains it? And I remember I wrote a book called How They Broke Britain, but it was designed as a full stop or a colon after which things would start getting better again. Yeah, good job I didn't hold my breath. Perhaps you could argue. I personally think that would be a bit disingenuous, but that's what we're going to look at in the next hour. I've got a quick, I've got a missing word round for you. Okay, we don't have a imaging. It's called, Keith. Did you know that? I learnt that last night at the Steve Wright tribute. It's called imaging, so I shouldn't keep saying stings and jingles. That's like the overall term for stings and jingles is imaging. So do we have any imaging for the missing word round? We don't. Have I asked for any and it just hasn't been delivered? No? Okay. This is a good one. Are you ready for this? This is today's missing word round. Pet tortoise found after 9 months, a whole blank away. Pet tortoise found after 9 months, a whole blank away. Fill in the blank if you can on 84850, or of course you can WhatsApp it to 03456060973. Back to the deep end, the question of why the officer acquitted or cleared of the murder of the gangster Chris Kaba, and thank you to all the people who've corrected me. It's not a gang called 67, it's called 67. Who knew? Should he be facing gross misconduct charges? And so far, so good. The question is clearly a lot more nuanced than a lot of the media coverage would allow. Beth is in Westminster. Beth, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I just wanted to give a different perspective. So I used to work for the IOPC.
Right.
A long time, about 10 years ago now. I just wanted to use one case to highlight why it is necessary for misconduct proceedings to follow after a criminal trial. You might remember the case of Ian Tomlinson, who sadly died at the G20 protest in London in 2009.
Of course.
So he was struck by an officer with a baton from behind and was pushed to the ground, and he subsequently died. Now, this was a very complicated medical trial. There were about 7 different medical experts, and ultimately the officer was found not guilty at the criminal trial. Now, misconduct proceedings followed because that is the procedure set out in statutory guidance by law, and at the misconduct proceedings, when you're judging an officer by the professional standard of behaviour, the use of force was found to be disproportionate and inappropriate. So you can have one outcome at a criminal trial, and when the officer is tested in their employment proceedings under the professional standards of behaviour, you can actually have a very different outcome. Now,
it's a powerful reminder of the importance. I know you're not suggesting for a minute that the two cases are interchangeable or
no,
identical.
Not at all, but I'm just using an example to highlight.
Exactly.
And also what I wanted to say is that the IOPC investigators will collect hundreds of statements, exhibits, body-worn camera as part of their investigation. That happens. The final report is written. It is passed to the Crown Prosecution Service. They decide whether to charge an officer or not. Lots of times they don't. The criminal trial takes place. The evidence from the criminal trial, new witness testimony and statements and so on are considered. And then the IOPC has to make a decision simply on, is there evidence suggesting a police officer has violated the standards of professional behaviour? That is all they get to consider in their conclusion. And if they think, yes, there is an indication, it is passed back to the Metropolitan Police, and then a disciplinary panel will be conducted with 3 Metropolitan Police officers, high-up Met officers, and they will then hear all of the evidence again, and they will decide whether the officer has breached their professional standard of behaviour. Not the IOPC will not be conducting the panel.
Right.
It's not a witch hunt on their part. It's decided by a panel of their peers.
I think this is the most important call I've taken all week when it comes to understanding a story that is under discussion, because to you, following those contributions, this is a pretty clear-cut case.
Well, it's not, you can't really, as far as I'm concerned, it's not something you decide or dispute. There's no decision to be made. If there's any indication at all that a standard of behaviour has been violated, and we don't know what standard of behaviour he's being adjudicated on, it goes back to the Metropolitan Police, and a hearing then has to take place. It's not the IOPC pursuing the officer.
It's a machine. It's an algorithm. It's as if the criteria has been fulfilled, statutory guidance has been breached or fulfilled, whatever word you prefer, then it triggers a process which leads inevitably to the IOPC investigation.
Well, not the investigation,
sorry,
to the disciplinary hearing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd just like to give another, if I can briefly, just give one more example.
Take all the time you want.
These are all in the public domain. So there was a case of an officer in the Metropolitan Police in the town of Bromley, and a young boy was pushed through a shop window.
Right.
Well, the officer doing the pushing and a colleague both said that the boy's right arm had come up, and this is why he pushed him back. Well, the CCTV didn't show the right arm, but the two officers in their account had both written the same false account, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
So the Crown Prosecution Service, after the investigation was conducted, said, no, we're not going to prosecute, let's call him Officer B, for perverting the course of justice, but we will prosecute Officer A for the common assault, for pushing him back. So after the criminal proceedings are concluded, Officer A, because there's an indication that they've breached the standard of use of force, has their disciplinary panel, and he's found guilty at the disciplinary panel, and he's dismissed from the Met Police. He was also found guilty at court, but that's by the by.
Yes, it is.
The other officer, who wasn't prosecuted perverting the course of justice, met the criteria for
gross misconduct. Or something similar. Yes.
Yeah, and it was for inaccurate notes, for poor misleading note keeping, because they wrote their pocket notebook together, and they both put in this description of the right arm going up, where the CCTV didn't show that, and other witnesses said the young boy's arm hadn't gone up. Well, at the gross misconduct hearing, Officer B was dismissed without notice for lying in his pocket notebook. So what I'm saying is you can have
all sorts of
many
things
nuances.
going on.
Yeah, but the IOPC are just conducting the investigation, collecting the evidence, passing it to CPS. It often comes back with no charge.
Yeah. But
then do they think, based on the evidence, there's an indication that a standard has been violated, yes or no? If yes,
it has to be it has to go forward.
Yeah, and so I just feel like you can't sort of say it's a witch hunt from the IOPC. Everyone, the people I knew who worked there were independent, of an independent mindset, collecting the evidence. It's not then their disciplinary panel. It's not at the IOPC building. It'd be at the Met, command in London and so on. It's not.
Well, I've heard a lot of coverage. I've heard a lot of coverage on the radio today, and I've got a horrible feeling I've been guilty even of conducting some that was ignorant of some of the details that you've provided. I mean, you've rendered it pretty close to a no-brainer. So how do you respond to people, including former police officers, suggesting that this is only happening because, for example, the victim was black?
Well, no, I would dispute that. I feel so sorry for officers. Officers I used to interview, officers, they are going through the absolute mill. It's awful for their families. Investigations take far too long. The investigations go on for years and years and years. Yeah. And then there's often inquest proceedings, criminal proceedings. So I completely feel for them. But this is the process set out in the statutory guidance. The IOPC can't, shy away from that. If there's any indication that they feel the evidence needs to be tested in an employment setting, so to speak, then there's not like wriggle room here to move away from that. It's nothing to do with race. It's just a procedure set out in law. They finished their independent report. This is now the next stage. They can't, after the criminal proceedings are finished, this is what you come back to. So if people want to challenge it, they need to challenge the process. The IOPC grossly is underfunded. I can categorically tell you that. Right. We used to have about 3 laptops between 30 investigators. We would never come out and defend ourselves, but I would have to meet with families who had just lost a loved one, and I would have to say, look, I have not been able to listen to the radio transmissions between the officers because I have not got a laptop because we just didn't have the equipment. And we were trying to do this important job, and you're basically hamstrung.
I've got a silly gimmick that I reserve for contributors to the programme who've gone above and beyond what we could reasonably expect. It would be inappropriate of me to trigger that gimmick, to trigger that gimmick now. But I want to tell you that your account of what is happening here is better than every single explanation I've heard, up to and including the former commissioner of the Metropolitan Police talking to Nick Ferrari earlier, which means you must get very frustrated by what you read and hear. I can hear it in your voice.
I don't work in the field now, unfortunately, because I've had my children and so on.
Of course.
It just frustrates me when I know how many people there are trying to do a decent job of finding out what happened. Ultimately, you're trying to find out what happened, like you're trying to find the truth. And then, I feel like they're getting pulled through the ringer when it's not, they're just doing their job ultimately. This is how the system works.
And how it has to work.
Well, yeah, and with a lot more funding, they could do a better job. But I mean, that's another story.
Well, it is another story. Was this an easy call for you to make, or did you think long and hard
really,
before you picked up the phone?
Yeah, I felt long. I knew it would bring up lots of emotions,
Yes.
and I really care about it. And there's so many complicated issues tied up in it, and I actually feel for all sides. I feel for the family of anyone who's loses their life at the hands of the state. And it's right; it should be investigated, and that it is all transparent, and that people are held to account. Has to be tested and has to be, find out what went on. But I also feel for the officers, and I feel for all my colleagues. And I just think people making simplistic statements about it does not aid the process here.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you.
Take care, you too. Wow. And that, I think, is the end of that conversation.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11. That's remarkable. I mean, I'm getting the kind of response to that call from Beth that I normally get when somebody comes on with extraordinary emotional revelation, or a call that would have been very hard to take for very personal reasons. And in a way, I suppose it was, but it wasn't her own trauma or her own heartbreak she was describing. It was an incredibly measured account of why, or rather more importantly, of how the IOPC operates, how a decision like this would have been arrived at with regard to the police officer who shot Chris Kaba dead, and indeed what will happen next. And not for the first time on this programme, I think you'll allow me to say, it is absolutely extraordinary how completely at odds with reality much of the reporting is, up to and including very senior police officers who quite possibly should know better. However, as a few of you have second-guessed, I decided that the subject matter, in conjunction with my esteemed colleagues, my top team, I decided that the subject matter was inappropriate for me to play out the little Ray Liotta clip. But it is Thursday, which means Mystery Hour is on the way in 55 minutes. And Mystery Hour historically is the part of the programme in which the Ray Liotta clips are, or the Ray Liotta clip is most likely to be played. But I don't think in a conversation about somebody being shot dead, murder trials and now gross misconduct allegations, that little bit of radio fun would have been appropriate. So here's what we're going to talk about next. And stop, all right? Well, not if you're driving, obviously. But I really want you to think about this one. I really want you to come up with an answer that makes you go, ooh. Because if it makes you go, ooh, then it's more likely to make me go, ooh. Or even, oh. That's what I want, actually. What would you prefer? An oh, which is all a bit Kenneth Williams, or an oh, which is a little bit enlightenment? I think we want ohs. I'm doing the facial expressions, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, or rather if you want to watch this on YouTube later. A dizzying array of facial expressions. Not quite sort of what's the chops in When Harry Met Sally, but a dizzying array of facial expressions nonetheless. Speaking of facial expressions, she only went and stuck it on Instagram. I mean, I told you yesterday about Mateless ambushing us. We look like the world's worst boy band. Me, Dan Walker and Johnny Vaughan, practicing Johnny Vaughan's advice that what you have to do when you're having a photograph taken is say hi, because it sort of makes the brow knit and the head lean forward. So Emily Maitlis said the other night, we were at the House of Lords for a thing, Global's Make Some Noise celebration, and she said she'd take a picture of us all doing it. So we did, but she didn't take a picture, did she? She videoed it, so we all look completely ridiculous, like three nodding dogs in a row. And she's now uploaded it to her Instagram page without asking permission or seeking clearances or doing any of the things that I think, or basic courtesy would demand, just inviting people to poke fun and abuse at the holy trinity of global radio presenters. 7 minutes after 11 is the time. So I want you to think about this. And some of the immediate answers you might give don't work because of all the countries that are above us. They have conducted a study of whether the inhabitants of different countries are flourishing. It is academics at Harvard who have interviewed or surveyed more than 200,000 people across 6 continents even. And they only included 22 countries. So it's 22 representative countries across all 6 continents and consisting of 200,000 contributors. And the question that they asked is whether or not you feel that you are flourishing. A question that breaks down into whether or not you feel that your life has meaning. And it's pretty grim. It's pretty grim when you break it down geographically. And it's also pretty grim when you break it down demographically, because it is, as we've often explored on this programme, Britons aged between 18 and 24 who appear to be struggling the most. COVID-19, the lingering effects of that. And I think increasingly we recognise the absolute horror show that social media possibly always was, but certainly has become, in the context of young people who've grown up with it, an absolute cross to bear. But I'm holding off on the reveal here because it's actually stunning. You look at all the countries in that 22, where are people flourishing? Where do people most feel that their life has meaning? And it's got nothing to do with wealth or even perhaps health. That's so weird. And this is why I want you to do some thinking. I want you to focus on less obvious questions, because the answer is not going to be health or wealth. I can tell you that because the top country is Indonesia. The second highest country is Israel. The third highest country is the Philippines. I'll give you just the list. Indonesia, Israel, Philippines, Mexico, Poland, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, Argentina. Why does Britain come almost bottom of this list? Of 22 countries where the population have been asked whether or not their life has meaning, whether or not they feel that they are flourishing, why does the UK come so low? Because it has nothing to do with per capita income. And it's got very little to do, looking at some of these countries which I've visited, with infrastructure. Certainly Mexico is not a place where the infrastructure feels complete. I mean, it may not feel faded. I don't want to start putting answers into your mouth, but it may not feel faded. It may not feel like its best days are behind us. Maybe that's going to be part of it. There's a difference between being on rung 3 of a ladder when that's the highest you've ever been, and being on rung 10 of a ladder when you used to be on 20. But I don't know. I don't know. One suggestion is religion, that countries with higher levels of religious engagement rank near the top. Indonesia, Israel, Philippines, Mexico, Poland. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I do remember when I was going through my school days, and I was kind of like I was never a pocket atheist at school, but I was a pocket troublemaker, and I was taught by monks. So there's a lot of opportunity for troublemaking when your teacher in, for example, religious education has dedicated his entire life to an unprovable belief. It's not just like having a normal RE teacher where they can sort of finish the lesson and go home, or finish the lesson and go off and teach geography or something like that. When your RE teacher is a monk, an actual monk, vow of celibacy and all of it, vow of poverty, chastity, all of it. When your RE teacher is an actual monk, and you are quite a what's the word I want? You're quite a mischievous debater. You're good at arguing. Well, you hopefully would have to be, wouldn't you, to do this job? But you're quite good at picking arguments apart, let's say. And it's a monk who's teaching you RE. I was always struck by a statistic one of them pulled out that showed actually countries where religion is popular, countries where religion is winning, are countries where the population reports being happier. How do you pronounce mischievous? What did I say? Did I say mischievous? This is beginning to annoy me, lads. So, no, I'm serious. You can't pick holes in my pronunciation of everything. Some words I say differently from you. The key, Canada yesterday. Canada. You say it. Canada. What did I say? I didn't know. I only said Canada after people started telling me off for saying Canada. I don't know. I mean, the problem is now I've drawn attention to it. It's going to happen more and more and more. This is what is called the Streisand effect, something that I didn't understand for a long time. I always thought the Streisand effect described bands that have announced that they're doing a final tour, and then 2 years later they announce that they're doing another final comeback farewell tour. It's nothing to do with that. The Streisand effect was about her complaining about a picture of her beach house being published in the newspaper, and the brouhaha and legal process generated by her complaining about a picture of her beach house being printed in a newspaper meant that millions more people saw the picture of her beach house printed in a newspaper than ever would have done if she just kept stum. I've just committed the cardinal sin of mildly irritating radio listener behaviour. I wasn't even talking about you. I was talking about my own colleagues, picking holes in how I say things. Mischievous, flipping heck, tomato. There's a whole song about why it doesn't matter. Potato, tomato. Mischievous, Canada, China. Anyway, I digress. I certainly do digress. And then now you're going to go through your favourite lists of things that I mispronounce. So cigarette will be at the top and computer. So there's a little bit of Kidderminster comes out sometimes. Well, 13 after 11. Anyway, none of that matters. It's not the way I pronounce words that explains why. Connecticut as well. I got into trouble for, yeah, all right, I told you, greatest hits time, is it? Yeah, ha, 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 what fun, what larks. It's not the reason why Brits report being unfulfilled and their lives having a lack of meaning. Self-referential though I can occasionally be, the way I pronounce some words eccentrically has no bearing at all upon the conversation that we are trying to conduct, okay? So why? It's mad, right? Why? We are GDP terms, they keep telling us, we're 5th or 6th. It's hard to keep track of course. Brexit has been a bit of a disaster, but not a big enough disaster to... I mean, look, I am Mr. Brexit. I'm hugely anti-Brexit, and I don't want to sound smug, but I feel enormously fulfilled. My life has great meaning. I'm not part of this statistic. If they'd asked me how I felt, well, it might have depended what day of the week it was. If it had come shortly after you'd all started queuing up to castigate the way I pronounce certain words, I may have reported much less satisfaction with my life than I generally feel. But I am... Thank God, and I haven't always been, and don't you dare start picking me up on how I pronounce Streisand, Robert. Honestly, some people. I don't know if this has been true at every period of my life, but I am happy and fulfilled. And I live in the same country that you live in. And it's not about per capita income. So it's not just because I'm doing all right. And I don't worry about some of the things that I'd worry about if I was earning less money. Something about this country. I was on a train at the weekend. I was pretty miserable at 5 o'clock on Saturday, actually, after Kidderminster somehow contrived to get thumped by Southport, of all people, after sitting on a train for 4 hours and knowing that I had a 4-hour train journey back. But that doesn't really count. I mean, you're not going to include these variables, these moments, in an analysis of how you feel about life. I have some faith. I have some religious faith. It comes and goes as religious faith. Not in the sense of, Charlton Heston in a biblical epic, but just in the sense of there being a little bit more to existence. I'd quote Hamlet or Bill and Ted, actually, rather than a religious text. There is more to heaven and earth, Horatio, than is dreamt of in your philosophy. I always find that speaks to a spiritual dimension to our existence. I think Hamlet is talking about seeing a ghost of his dead father. That's not a spoiler. It's in Act 1, Scene 1. Not when Hamlet sees him, but when he is first seen by the audience. So that idea there, and the other one is be excellent to each other, which doesn't really have a spiritual dimension. But if you start asking why should we be excellent to each other, you move into the realms of a spiritual dimension. So it's not going to be that. Japan came last on this list, which has the lowest engagement with religion. I didn't know that. I did not know that. Israel, which is the highest ranked wealthy country, so of all the wealthy countries, Israel had the highest rates of religious participation, which is a slightly uncomfortable but timely moment to mention Louis Theroux's latest documentary, The Settlers, which is an absolutely superlative piece of filmmaking by the finest documentary maker of his age, bar none, and which is inevitably, given that it's a documentary that focuses entirely upon the religious nationalist Israelis illegally occupying the West Bank, has prompted much of the right-wing media to ask why he didn't make an entirely different film about entirely different people. That's generally how it works. But if you haven't seen The Settlers, I've not watched it all yet, but what I have seen of it and what I have read of it puts it... Well, it actually begs the question of how anybody living in Israel alongside this kind of thing could be fulfilled or flourishing, given what was being done arguably in their name. But let's not open up that particular box of tricks today. Let's return to the question of Israel being the wealthiest country on the list, but also the one with the highest engagement. In fact, looking at this, it's going to be quite hard to argue against the idea that religious belief makes people happier. Crazy, right? And then perhaps the financial question does come in. One of the researchers at Harvard, a co-author of the study, looks at the loss of industrial jobs in this country. And again, I think my rung analogy is going to work quite well here. I think if you're on rung 5, but it's the highest you've ever been, you're going to feel more fulfilled and more flourishing than people on rung 10 who used to be on rung 20. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? If that's the best it's been in your country, you're going to feel better than people who are measurably better off than you, but worse off than they used to be. I think that could be crucial here. And what Brendan Case says, the co-author of the study, is it seems reasonable to think that one core determinant of flourishing is being able to provide in a meaningful way for oneself and one's family, being able to do work that doesn't feel humiliating or meaningless, being able to achieve a position in your community that is rewarded with real respect. They then go on to look at religion. But there's going to be a million different things. Or if not a million, then at least 30. I want to know what you think they are. Why do you think that the United Kingdom has come near the bottom of an international survey into how fulfilled we, the people, feel? 0345 6060 973. And give me your answer and your explanation. So if you just want to enforce the idea that it's religion, tell me why you think religion makes people happier, especially if it's not you. You kind of, do you know what? I'm a miserable atheist now, but when I was religious, I think I was actually happier, James. 0345 6060 973. 20th out of 22. It's a grim achievement, a grim result. What do you think explains it? The UK near the bottom of world rankings, measuring whether or not the inhabitants of a country feel that they are flourishing. Hit the numbers now. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 22 minutes after 11. Listen, I don't know whether being fulfilled is different from being happy. On the UN Happiness Index, which measured rather more countries, we do okay. We come in at 23rd, behind Germany, the United Arab Emirates, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Canada, Austria, Switzerland. Israel does quite well again, although not as well as it does in this one. Finland comes top, always comes top. This is the Happiness Index. Are you happy? I'm happy, but I'm unfulfilled. That works, doesn't it? I'm happy, but I'm unfulfilled? I don't know. But why do you think the UK comes close to the bottom in an international survey of asking people whether or not they feel fulfilled? I'll just give you the number and then you can tell me. 0345 6060 973. Simon is in Ascot. Simon, what would you like to say?
I was just saying to your producer, I can't speak on behalf of anybody from any other country, but I am currently going through therapy for feeling how you've described, of there's no future and no hope. Sorry, I'm very nervous. I've lost my trail of thought.
No, take your time. It's only me. So you're describing a sense of dislocation, and you've been wise enough to realise that you're unlikely to get out of this hole on your own. So you're trying to find a little bit of help.
Yeah, I pay rent, and I know I'll never be able to afford my own home. I work for a very rich person. I know when I retire, my body from doing a physical job isn't going to be to enjoy it. Myself and many others are in a situation where both parents or partners go out to work and nobody's at home as much as we were supposed to, I believe, to raise kids, maybe as many years ago. We're all, as humans, I don't think, supposed to be living like this, where we're just working and paying bills and staring into screens. I'm guilty of that myself. It's addictive.
Oh, it is as well. I mean, I think, can we try and get him back? I want to make sure he's okay. That addiction, I think, was the word. I think got cut off at the rather inopportune moment. But good Lord, I mean, I was listening to that with a growing sense of enlightenment, actually, as if what he was describing. And of course, the point I made in the introduction is that it doesn't matter that the people above us on the list are poorer because they're not doing the grass is greener syndrome. You were providing a litany there, Simon, of modern existence. And what I would ask you now is what is peculiarly British about it, do you think? Because there's a lot of European countries above us on the list where some of these things would still hold true.
I don't honestly know, as a British person who has travelled but doesn't know many foreign people or lived abroad, to know maybe the quality of life. I know in France, I was there for a small time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think the phone line's going to defeat us. I hope that you're still listening, because I'm going to pick them off one by one, and we're going to look at property prices and people being squeezed out of the property market without rent control. So in some other countries, I like Simon, I'm not qualified to speak for any other country, but I can speak about them. I remember when we were in Vienna a few years ago. I'm such a geek. Two things I remember about Vienna. Well, no, that's not true. Obviously, places that we visited and stuff like that. But Vienna had the most delicious tap water I've ever drunk. It was absolutely ridiculous. Anyone who pays for mineral water in Vienna is a silly old sausage. And the second thing about Vienna that I actually looked up, I think I asked the Mayor of London about it when I got back, was the rent control. The rent control in Vienna is extraordinary. So what we have is the worst of both possible worlds. We have a society in which we have been raised to presume property ownership or to aspire to property ownership, but it's almost impossible. It's become harder than ever before, harder than it was for our parents' generation. So that is peculiarly British. And then he mentioned working for a very rich boss. So I'm going to file that under either grass is greener syndrome. No, that doesn't work, does it? It's not that figure of speech at all. I'm going to file it under distribution of wealth. So we also have, after, and remember, I can't really be political today, but after 30 years or 50 years of movement in our society, the distribution of wealth is off the charts. The accumulation of wealth at the very top, and the United States wasn't included in this survey, by the way, is such that you watch people, including in Simon's case, your own employer, becoming richer than Croesus, while your own situation is being pared to the bone. You know, so many people experience, how do you get someone rich to work harder? Give them more money. How do you get someone poor to work harder? Give them less money. That's simplistic, but I think that is probably more true here than it is in some of the other countries on the list. I thought of the old story about the boss taking you out into the car park, putting an arm around your shoulder and showing you his Porsche and saying, do you know what? I've just bought this Porsche, and if you work hard all year, Simon, then, you know, in 5 years' time, I'll be able to buy myself another one. I think that's why he mentioned it. Is that peculiarly British? Who's qualified to make the comparisons? And what would you add to the list? So I've got property prices and wealth distribution. We've got industrial decline and possibly religion. Josh is in Luton. Josh, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I have been until very recently, about a month ago, in spiritual care in the NHS in our mental health service. Yes, as a chaplain. I'm not religious, though.
Okay. But how does that work?
We look after everybody's spirituality, and it's just like if you went into one of our units and talked to someone who wasn't religious or someone from a different religion with you, you'd still have that need to enter their space and support their spirituality, support their worldview.
Wow.
And so I spent the last 5 years of my life, especially during COVID, I suddenly became a full-timer at it.
Gosh.
And
that is what you're bringing to this conversation is.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I've gone down an alleyway.
We all do it, Josh. We all do it, mate. Do not worry. You're in good company. Go on.
But I mean, I wanted to talk about meaning and purpose and how they link to spirituality, because you talked about meaning, and I think in Britain we have an idea of ourselves that is disconnected with who we really are. And you talk about this a lot. You know, and it's not just Brexit. It goes all the way back to 100 years ago when the British Empire went, oh, sorry, you all had to take over USA. You know, there is that idea from school, especially if you went to a school like you or I did, that you're the master of the universe. And we're teaching people that still to some extent, to some small extent. And we're really, really not.
Oh, and if we're not teaching them what they are, we're teaching them what they should be, and it's all the fault of pesky political correctness and the woke mob that they're not.
But I also think that meaning, because we think of meaning as eternal and important and who we are in the world and so on, the first bit of meaning that I get in my life is when I come down in the morning and my dog leaps around and is incredibly glad to see me, and I feel so connected to myself and my life, you know?
I'd have put dog owning on this list. I'd have looked into that as well. I mean, the problem is it's not going to be the same proposition across all the other countries, is it?
No. But I mean, that's why I wanted to bring up. That's why I wanted really to talk about that idea of the disconnect between who we think we are, and conversations that I've had over the last 5 years.
This is really interesting.
In our mental health trust have certainly backed that up. That people feel, you know, and this for the same reasons that people are going to be.
No, dump that. Okay, you can't say anything about voting or anything political today. Good Lord, you gave me an absolute heart attack there. That's all right. It's not your fault. You're not Ofcom regulated, but I am. So don't say anything at all about voting. Let me just change direction slightly, Simon, if I may. Because what the previous, not Simon, sorry, Josh, what the previous caller Simon was saying, and the next caller is called Simeon, so it's no surprise I get confused. He was describing a dissatisfaction with his lot, which is one thing, and that what you're describing plays into a dissatisfaction with your lot, but it adds an extra dimension of having almost been raised on the promise of receiving more.
Well, that's why I think we're in this particular hole in Britain, really.
Yes, I think you might be right. I'm going to move on because you've made me nervous, and no one ever do that. You see how loud I shouted there, just in case he didn't stop talking or in case Keith didn't press the button. So I thought if I shout loud enough, then no one will be able to hear what he's actually saying. That is radio gold, that is. That's an absolute kicker. Here's Thomas Watts with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 minutes after 11 is the time. When a story breaks in the morning, it is sometimes difficult to get a proper handle upon its significance if, like you are, like me, an absolute amateur at everything. BBC were going nuts this morning over the imminent signing or the actual signing of a mineral and profit-sharing deal between Ukraine and the United States. This is yesterday evening in Washington, D.C. It does nothing. It does none of the things that Donald Trump insisted it would do. I mean, literally none of them. But it does apparently create the possibility of a partnership, a sharing on a 50-50 basis of the so-called earth minerals that Ukraine possesses in return for continuing US contribution to Ukraine's resistance of what, for the first time, I think, Donald Trump's administration described as Russia's full-scale invasion. So he hasn't stopped the war on day one. He hasn't got the $300 billion in back payments on the US contribution to the defense of Ukraine, which he demanded, despite the fact that, in classic Trumpian fashion, the real figure wasn't even $300 billion. It was $130 billion since 2022. He hasn't done a deal with Vladimir Putin or managed to persuade Vladimir Putin to stop his hostilities. He hasn't done anything that he said he would do, but he has done something, which will no doubt evince another lap of honour. That's what I've worked out how he operates. He says he's going to give you the world. He ends up with about 1/20th of the world, and he claims that was the plan all along, and he's a genius for pulling it off. But don't take my word for it. Phillips O'Brien is the Professor of Strategic Studies at the University of St Andrews, and he joins me now. Is this a champagne cork moment, do you think, Phillips, for Ukrainians or indeed the rest of us?
Trump has changed his entire worldview. He no longer likes Putin. He loves Ukraine. Everything's going to be wonderful, and the world is transformed. The hope that people put into Donald Trump is astonishing. That he just throws these occasional little tidbits and people lose their mind. This agreement has nothing concrete for Ukraine. There's no security guarantees for Ukraine. There's no permanent even pledges of aid. There's nothing to it. In fact, it's really something that talks about generating income 10 years down the road. It's probably, look, I don't know. Trump didn't tell me what he was doing. But it's probably, something that he can claim political victory to his base. We've made Ukraine pay. It doesn't cost the U.S. anything. The thing that drives me nuts, though, is it makes people have hope in Trump. And I think having hope in Trump is a really dangerous thing to have because it means you're not looking at reality.
Why then would Ukraine cooperate in this process? I think I know the answer. I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, they have nothing to lose. Yeah. I mean, they maybe got $50 million of aid out of it, which $50 million, by the way, would be eaten up in a few minutes in this war. But they don't have anything to gain by angering Trump and being particularly difficult. They actually stood up to him, from what we can tell. The original versions of this deal were terrible for Ukraine, and they refused those. So they give him a political victory. They pretend like it provides some interest of the U.S. in a Ukrainian victory, which it doesn't. And they can claim it was a success too. But I think people talking about this making a major difference have simply not learned the lesson of the last few months and years.
I'm thinking of Joseph Heller, actually. I mean, we spoke yesterday on the programme about the Supreme Court ruling 9-0, demanding the return of the deported man, and Trump parading it as the opposite. I mean, publicly claiming his advisors had told him that he won 9-0. So I don't think we live in a world, Phillips, where conceivably the war continues and Trump claims that he's actually ended it.
Well, he's still never broken with Putin. That's the thing is, he keeps saying, "Oh, I'm angry at Putin." In fact, one point he pissed off at Putin.
Yes, he did use that word.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know. At least it's not the local elections.
Correct. Yeah, don't go there.
But what happens is that he says these things, but he does nothing. He's not done anything tough on Putin. Putin continues. Last night, the Russians attacked Odessa. They continue these civilian attacks all the time, and Trump does nothing about them. He is not going to be anti-Russian or anti-Putin. That's not what he is. And it's one of those that the people are grasping around to try and find things that make them feel better rather than facing, I think, the truth of where we are.
Well, with that in mind, and I hope I don't grasp around on this, but it's better than the US walking away completely, which we feared a little. Is it or not?
Well, this is an interesting thing. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I don't know, James. But I don't know this because in many ways, the U.S. walking away forces Europe to act and look after itself. And I've come to the conclusion that might not be a bad thing.
Even in the short term? Even
in the short term, because the longer it's delayed, the longer it takes. And it would be much better for European states to realize this is where we are. And the U.S. is not to be relied upon, and stop trying to have all these meaningless symbolic victories with Trump and get on with the fact of Europe looking after itself. So personally, I'm not persuaded by the argument that this could be a good thing because it provides a fig leaf. In many ways, rip the fig leaf off.
Okay.
And let's look at the world as it is.
And Europe needs to get its house in order sooner rather than later, and this increases the possibility of some European leaders opting for later rather than sooner.
Absolutely. Anything that delays is bad.
What should we be looking for then in terms of detail?
The only really thing to see if there's any substance to this continued military aid to Ukraine.
Yeah.
All right. That's the test. Now, if the United States allows Ukraine and gives Ukraine more military aid, then that's a sign that the deal might have some teeth. If there's no military aid that follows up beyond the $50 million, which again is meaningless.
Yes, of course.
Then I think we can say that this was a sham.
And when would we know that? I know that's a slightly speculative
Well, we will
question.
know it if there's more military aid, but if there's no military aid...
Should we just wait to see whether or not the tap is turned back on again?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's no military aid announced in the next few weeks, then nothing's there.
And final question, Phillips, if it isn't, where does that leave Ukraine? If the tap is not turned back on, and if Europe doesn't offer up an alternative supply in the time available, where does that leave Ukraine? And indeed Putin?
If Europe does nothing, then Ukraine will be in a bad position in a few months. European states have been stepping up a little bit more. They need to step up more than they have. I mean, one thing we have seen is the Ukrainian defense has become quite successful in the last few months, and the Russians really are suffering in their attempts to go forward. So it's not like this is hopeless for Ukraine at all. But having no U.S. aid and no improved European aid is not an ideal solution.
No, clearly not. Thank you, Philip. So I mean, as I mentioned just before I introduced you, the scale and the tone of the coverage in some quarters this morning has been a little bit ill-advised.
It's like the St. Peter's picture. Oh, my God, Zelensky and Trump sitting in St. Peter's. They're going to love. People just get suckered in by Trump time and time again. It's actually one of the reasons for his success.
Of course it is. Thank you. Thanks to your counsel and contributions. I hope that this programme, and among others, I hope that this programme is not one of the places that keeps getting suckered in by Trump. But while he was talking, how many people were thinking about Kemi Badenoch's trade deal with Texas? A big announcement, lots of fanfare. Absolutely nothing in it. Absolutely nothing in it. I don't know. That's just a thought. Maybe I'm abnormal. It's 11:43. I'm clearly abnormal in the UK because I don't feel unfulfilled. I wonder, the earlier caller mentioned therapy. I found therapy life-changing. I've talked about this a lot. I don't know that I've talked about it too often, but I could imagine it becoming a bit boring for you, especially if you're one of those people who somewhere deep inside knows that you'd benefit from it, but are still furiously committed to the idea that you absolutely wouldn't because it's weird or woke or politically correct or whatever, being in touch with your feelings, whatever words you use to insist that being better in touch with your feelings is undesirable and is a bad thing. But I'd still have moments of unfulfillment. Certainly as you get older, you start thinking about, if not legacy, that's a fairly pompous thing to think about, but think the mark you might leave. But that's where family kicks in. So why would the UK be so near the bottom of this list? Poor old Simeon in Finland has been waiting for so long now because he didn't realise Phillips was going to be coming on. I'm not going to take his call because I've only got 40 seconds left before the break, and it wouldn't be fair to make him wait that long and then only give him 40 seconds. So what I'll do in a moment is go to the break and then go first to Simeon, who's in Finland first. And why would Simeon in Finland be interesting? Well, I don't think they were included in the latest Harvard inquiry into why what makes life fulfilling or who feels life is fulfilling, but they come top every year of the Happiness League. If he's able to draw comparisons or stick a foot in both camps, then it could be a fascinating insight. And then, of course, Mystery Hour is with us at 12, and I'll give you the answer to the missing word round as well, which I quite like this. No one got it right. Pet tortoise found after 9 months, a whole blank away. Pet tortoise found after 9 months, a whole blank away. I'll tell you after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Mile. Pet tortoise found after 9 months, a whole mile away. It's called Leonardo, if you're interested. 11:47 is the time. Simeon is in Tampere or Tampere. No, Tampere. Tampere? Anyway, he's in Finland. Simeon, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello. So I decided to look up the study. I did some cheating. The top 5 countries they have are Indonesia, Mexico, Philippines, Israel, and Nigeria.
Yes.
And then I also looked at the questions, and they've got 2 questions about finances, and then a bunch of questions about happiness, health, meaning, character, and relationships.
Yes.
So I feel like with this question, the financial element, when answering it, can be overstated. Instead, I'd like to return to religion. And not just religion as in spirituality or faith. That obviously helps with meaning, sure.
Of course.
But religion is so much more than that, because religion is community. It's friendships, it's people, it's relationships. And I think that's why religion and its linked
It's clearly one of the defining factors, and it trumps, for want of a better word, per capita income or personal wealth. And Finland's not on the list, as you know, but it is usually top of the United Nations happiness survey. I don't think of Finland as being a particularly religious country. Is that my mistake?
No, not at all. I mean, it's absolutely not religious. If I could also add...
Hang on, I'm interrupting you at the moment. Fulfillment and happiness, then, are 2 quite different things, according to these 2 surveys.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Do you think?
I mean, if I can just add, okay. I don't think it's religion per se. I think it's more about overall community and having friends, which ties back to the UK particular point. Because in the UK, for example, I think... obviously, lots of pubs have closed down. People have less third spaces to socialise in. You've talked a lot about young men feeling unsatisfied lately. They don't have relationships. They might not have as many friends as before. So it's not just about faith; it's about all of the social
that's
contact.
really interesting.
It's about friendship.
Because
it's about people.
you can have community, you can have friendship. You don't need faith to have it, but religious organisations generally help provide it. You can find it in lots of other places. And you mentioned the pub, which is probably one of the best examples, or sports clubs, youth clubs, all of the things where public money is being spent upon community projects or society, or private money is being spent on socialising. And it does feel in this country as if they are they in retreat, as if they are diminishing. Have you spent much time here, Simeon?
Well, I did my uni in Scotland, so yes.
No, fine. And some people are cross with me for reporting on this as a United Kingdom issue, because they insist that everyone in Scotland is much happier than they are here. But I can only work with what's in front of me. And also, the people sending me messages explaining that Scotland is much happier here sound very angry. They don't sound very happy at all. So I'll leave that one in the lap of the gods. In a sentence, why is Finland so much happier than Scotland or the UK?
Just in one sentence. Well, there's a couple of reasons. Welfare, safety nets.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone and trust. People trust society. People know that even if you screw things up, like life screws you, then you'll get help, you'll get support.
That's interesting.
And secondly, I think there's an interesting element to it as well. In some of the other Nordic countries, you have this so-called law of Jante, Jante, which basically says don't flaunt around, don't show off, just be humble and stuff. And I think that plays into it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe in some ways you could say that you have this aspect of don't show off your wealth, just kind of be happy with what you have.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before. How do you pronounce it?
Law of Jante.
Jante. I like Jante. I was in Lincoln's Inn Fields yesterday, and someone pulled up in a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, and it was really interesting how everyone rubbernecked. It was quite odd. You'd think that cars like that were seen quite often in central London, but there must have just been something about the engagement, that moment of engagement. Given where the car was pulling up, the woman who got out was probably off to see her divorce lawyer. But the combination of someone who looked like an armed bodyguard, perhaps, but the real opulence of the car, and Lincoln's Inn Fields is full of lawyers usually, or people who work for law firms, city workers, having a nice lunch break in the park. And I don't know why. Sometimes things hit you. You're just taken aback by things. I couldn't believe how much rubbernecking there was. So I walked past as the back door opened, and I was mildly curious to see who might be getting out, just in case it was Elton John or someone. But it wasn't, and so my curiosity disappeared. But as I made my way down the pavement, everybody was rubbernecking, turning back to look. It was anyway. So that would be the opposite of what I now know is called Janta. Let's squeeze in Will in Hereford, and then I want to play you some. I mean, these moments from the court of Donald Trump that need to be broadcast. I don't know what difference it makes, but listening to Phillips O'Brien explaining the borderline idiocy of continuing to treat him seriously, or to treat him like a normal politician. I think you need to see how the people around him treat him, perhaps, to get a really clear picture of just how abnormal everything is. And this woman, Pam Bondi, it seems to have set all manner of new records for sycophancy, which I don't think you're going to believe me when I play you the clip. I think you're going to think it's doctored or AI or something from Saturday Night Live or satire. But it isn't. That's coming up. And then Mystery Hour. Will's in Hereford. Will, what would you like to say?
Hey, morning, James.
Hello.
It's such a privilege to be able to speak to you. I've been listening to you.
Hopefully it's a pleasure, but it's definitely not a privilege, Will. Thank you.
Since I was a child, I've been listening to you, and now I'm a 30-year-old man with a child myself, so it's a real privilge, mate. Thank you so much.
Thanks for making me feel ancient. Go on, then. What do you want to say?
That wasn't intentional. I've got two key points, really, that I think maybe offers some explanation to this. The first is on the religious angle. So
yes.
I would describe myself as deeply religious. I have a very strong Christian faith that I have had since I was a child, that my parents instilled into me. And I do think that there's something in the decline of religion and decline of faith, at least on the surface, in this country, that maybe has something to do with it.
Yeah, the numbers support you. The numbers support you.
I think one of the things that, and I can only speak to my faith and what it's done in my life and the faith of my friends, but Christianity is something that points to something outside of ourselves and something greater than ourselves. I think when we look inward for satisfaction or to the things immediately around us, particularly materialism or our circumstances, I think we're always going to be unfulfilled because those things are inherently dissatisfying. I think I can think of so many friends that are in really difficult circumstances now and have been for a while and are so fulfilled and are so full of joy, and they would point directly to their faith in God and to the way that Jesus has changed their lives. And I've seen so many of my friends, even recently, I've got a very good friend who only recently came to faith in the last 12 months, and in his own words, tried to fill his life with absolutely everything he could. He owns land, he has lots of money, he had a really nice sports car, and he just felt so empty. He just had this deep emptiness within him that couldn't be fulfilled. And
this
in the
is
last 12 months, he came to faith. He found Jesus.
He found what was missing in his life.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, what is interesting about this, particularly interesting, is it's a double-edged sword in a way. It's why your example of a wealthy man is helpful, because if Karl Marx was here, he'd be tearing what's left of his hair out, because he thinks, of course, that the promise of rewards in the afterlife and religion in this earth is a way to keep poverty quelled. It's a way to keep a lid upon inequality, because look, all right, this life might be rubbish, but I promise you're going to get all sorts of rewards in the next world. And that's, I think, where the phrase opiate of the people comes from. But actually you're describing a kind of almost the other side of the coin. I mean, you are finding your happiness in this world based on a belief in the next one, but it would still fit the Marxist analysis of the rich man in his castle is celebrating you being happy with your meager slice of the pie while he keeps all of it.
Well, I think it's in a hope of something that is yet to be realised. Yes. I mean, it was immortalised in Jesus' words, like in the world you will have trouble, but fear not, because I have overcome the world. And I think it's very easy for me to say I'm in perfect health, I've got a very nice job, a great family. Like, it's easy for me to say that circumstances shouldn't affect how you feel. And I don't want to throw that as a flippant comment, but in the people around me, I've got another good friend. She suffered with her mental health for many, many, many years. She's on antidepressants now, and she's one of the most joyful, satisfied people that I know, because she would point directly to her faith in Jesus Christ.
And a lot of people do, and I think today is a day where we let that roll. I think that's a really helpful contribution, Will. Thank you. You've almost clawed back the trouble you were in for making me feel absolutely ancient by describing yourself as someone who listened to me as a child who now has a child of his own. Holy McMoly. Well, God bless. It is 11:57. Okay, true or false, real or fake? Actual homage being paid in the court of King Donald, or something from Saturday Night Live, voiced by Tina Fey?
President, your first 100 days has far exceeded that of any other presidency in this country, ever. Never seen anything like it. Thank you. Since you have been in office, President Trump, your DOJ agencies have seized more than 22 million fentanyl pills, 3,400 kilos of fentanyl since you've been your last 100 days, which saved, are you ready for this, media, 258 million lives.
Sorry, what? Pardon?
258 million lives.
Come again?
258 million lives.
So the population of the United States of America, the last time I checked, is 340 million. Right, so 340 million people in the United States of America. How many lives did he save again?
258 million lives.
358 over 340, pass to carry 2, that's minus 64, the square root of 12. 75% of the population would be dead if it wasn't for Donald Trump. 70, that's real. There she is. And, there's even competition for the title of biggest creep in court, biggest creep in town. The Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum, said, sounds like a character from The Simpsons, doesn't he? He said, "You're not just courageous, you're actually fearless," about a man who dodged the draft during the Vietnam War and then described his successful avoidance of sexually transmitted diseases during the 1980s as his own personal Vietnam. Man, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's the satirists I feel sorry for.
James O'Brien on LBC.
minutes after 12 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where, as the man said, it is now time for Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. The way it works is this. You ring in with a question, a mystery, a riddle, an enigma, and someone else rings in with an answer. That's it. 03456060973 is the number you need. Make the my favourite contribution of the week, and you will win a Mystery Hour board game. You can find the full terms and conditions for that proper grown-up radio competition at lbc.co.uk. And, of course, if you want to buy a board game, then you can just go to mysteryhour.co.uk, where opportunities abound. But that is it. I mean, I also usually make a promise of one laugh out loud moment between now and 1 o'clock. So, do you know what? I'll do that today as well. It's a promise. I think we'll start, shall we? Just crack straight on. That's all the explanation that is needed. Suze is in Redhill in Surrey. Suze, question or answer?
It's a question.
Carry on, Suze.
So I'm in the office with my girls, and it's not so much my question. It's actually my colleague. It's made her ponder for the last couple of 3 weeks because we've got a bit of an ant problem going on.
Ugh.
Yes. So they're getting up on our desks, and when we flick them off, they land on the floor, think about it for a minute, and then they carry on wandering.
Yeah.
Our question is, why don't they get injured, or why do they not die?
I know this.
You know this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Terminal velocity.
Okay.
So, terminal velocity, a crucial part of the maximum speed that you can reach as you fall through space is your mass, is your weight.
Yes.
And ants are so light that they never achieve the kind of speed we would achieve, which means that when they hit the ground, the impact is not going to be anything like as damaging as it would be for a much heavier object like a human.
And that's what we were comparing it to.
And that is why. So the crucial equation, I don't know, but it involves mass. So when you're calculating the speed that something can reach, and terminal velocity is the maximum speed that any object falling through space can reach, and there'd be, depending on how heavier you are, you get closer and closer to that maximum speed until you reach it, and then it doesn't matter how much space there is to fall through. You're never going to accelerate faster than you're going when you reach terminal velocity.
Unbelievable.
That's pretty good, right? That's pretty strong. Yes, you're going to accept
strong.
that. You have to.
I have to say, my colleague Gillian and Riz, they are happy with that answer.
Is anyone doing any work today, girls?
We are.
Well,
yes,
it doesn't sound like
hard.
it. It doesn't sound like it.
You have to have some downtime.
Well, is it Gillian and Riz that are with you?
Gillian and Riz that are with me,
okay,
yes.
Can you get them to do the applause, and I'll get Keith to chip in his as well. But I want the stereo applause now, please.
He wants a stereo applause, please, ladies.
Let's go.
Woo!
I love it. Thank you very much. What a wonderful start. Thank you, Suze. Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, Riz. And I can cross that one off before we've even started. Jim's in Lanark. Jim, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
I was watching Match of the Day the other night, and when I think back in my life going to the football, there's a chant that is universal across every country, certainly in the UK. And you know when they do Kidderminster?
Yeah. All right, don't rub it in,
or
mate.
Arsenal. Where did that originate? Who started it? And what does it mean?
There's one about haircuts, isn't there? Like back in the day, like shaving a haircut 2 pence or something like that.
I don't know. I'm a bald man, so haircuts are not on my radar. No, but this is like hundreds of years old. It's not about whether you've got hair or not. So that famous rhythm. What's the word for a rhythm? It's not a rhythm. Is that famous peal? Chant.
It's not a chant. It's what is it? It's like it's a beat, a succession of notes.
It's a beat.
That one.
Yeah, that one.
Harriet.
No, it's.
What? Oh, you're doing that one. Oh, that's not the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Harriers! That one.
That's the one.
Yeah. I don't know, mate. It's a good question.
I'm not losing sleep over it, but I'm curious.
No, I am now as well. So it was shave and a haircut, 2 bits. So it's not that. It's not that. No, do one of yours again, because I'm going to get an earworm with the other one.
Yeah.
Not that one.
No.
Harriers! That one.
That's the one.
That's
the one.
We're playing on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Big game. Thank you, Jim. You're on. I wonder, I don't know. Let's give Lineker a ring, see if he knows. I bet he doesn't know. Why would he know? No one knows. Thank you. Graham's in Totnes. Graham, question or answer?
Hello, James. It's a question.
Hello, Graham.
And the question is about evolution.
Oh.
I understand how giraffes got taller with nice long necks because of reaching up for leaves over their heads in the trees.
Yes.
But my question is, how on earth, rather, did caterpillars become butterflies?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it?
Because somehow or other, because they don't just straight become a butterfly, they go into a chrysalis phase as well.
They do.
And the whole thing is just so incredibly complex. So how do you break that down into stages so that the evolutionary process would arrive at the solution that we see today?
Well, I mean, you're only allowed one question.
Yeah. Well,
so that is I mean, how would an evolutionist explain butterflies and caterpillars?
Well, this is why you're so good at your job, James.
Well, I say very kind of you, Graham. I studied genetics at university, would you believe? There's a kind of, I don't remember studying this. There's some animals that are, or some creatures that are anomalous in the context of survival, or appear to be anomalous in the context of survival of the fittest. Homosexuality, for example, can, under some readings of evolutionary theory, make no sense, because there's, you know, how can people be created gay when they then don't have the reproductive urge, as it were, or even if they do have the reproductive urge, their sexual proclivities don't enhance the likelihood of reproducing. So, and the ant and the peacock are very good examples of things that make sense, but only when you really number crunch it. But I can't remember anyone ever doing butterflies and caterpillars. That's a great question.
Excellent. Well, no, we're both puzzled. You have superb people who ring in, so let's see if somebody can help us both out.
There you go. Graham's doing his own presenting now. There it is. I don't need to add anything to that except the phone number. Actually, do you want to do the phone number, Graham?
I can't remember it because it's on
just dialed it.
dial.
Oh, all right then. That's a good excuse. 10 minutes after 0345 6060 There's some children, you know, that's their first words. People have got LBC on in the car so much, their very first words are 0345 6060 973. Matthew's in Richmond. Matthew, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
I want to know how we know that we perceive colours the same as other people.
It's a good question, this. I think we've knocked at this door before, but I can't remember whether we got through it or not.
Possibly. I can't remember, but
So you say blue, and I see something. How do I know that's the same thing you see?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was explaining to your producer that my left eye perceives colours as warmer than my right eye. So my right eye is cooler.
How do you know that?
Shades. Well, because I can shut one
and
open the other.
And there's visible differences?
Yeah.
This is going to look great on YouTube. Hang on. Have I got a nice... I've got a red folder here. Wait there. Ready?
Well,
no, I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting any difference.
No, but it's so... If my eyes don't agree, how do I know that other people, when they see green, will see the same green as I do?
Oh, no. Whoa, hang on. I don't know. That's a different... I thought you just meant green.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's been sparked by this thing in my head of not knowing, you know...
One blue, two blues, warmer and cooler.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, you're not alone. Alice is the same. That's it would appear that you're not alone, but we shall find out. Okay, let's get it for you. So colours, how do we know that when we say a colour that everyone else, almost everyone, apart from colourblind people, is actually seeing the same colour? We could all live in completely independent worlds of colour.
Yeah, I mean, it's also sort of going back. I know you're a fan of classicism, so like the wine dark sea.
Yeah.
So So
there's quite a few people. You can't, Mark. Come here a minute. Not you, Matthew. I'm just going to deal with Mark for a moment. Mark, shut up, mate. You can't text nonsense on this just because it doesn't apply to you. You can't prove that it doesn't apply to Matthew just because you've just done what I've done with your eyes, you absolute hermit, and decided that you can't. Oh, heavens above. There's lots of people, about a dozen people are describing that it has actually happened to them. So there you go. You're not on your own. But we shall see. Good. We shall see. Thank you for that, Matthew. I like that question. 12:13 is the time. I mean, more likely you can answer the question about colours per se than about two different eyes perceiving slightly different shades of the same colour. But there it is. John's in Bexley Heath. John, question or answer?
A question, please, James.
Carry on, John.
Right. Okay. So quite a few years ago, when my daughter was younger, so maybe 10, we bought a Christmas candle, and it was one of those ones that fizzed and popped and smelled of Christmas. And my wife was sitting there.
What does Christmas smell like?
Well, like Christmas trees, actually.
Got a pine. It was like a piney.
It smelled, pine.
Not cinnamony. Not cinnamony. I'd have put a bit of cinnamon in there, mate.
No, she doesn't like cinnamon.
Oh, all right. Yeah, but it doesn't matter what she likes. We're talking about the smell of bloody Christmas for everyone.
Yeah. So she said, we should have bought two of those candles.
Yeah.
And my daughter got up and picked this candle up from the hearth of the fireplace and stuck it on the mantelpiece in front of the mirror and went, well, now we've got two.
Clever girl.
And we went, wow. And then we said, well, have we got two of the power of the candles, or have we still only got one candle power of light? In other words, the lumens. And
I got that. Lumens in a crossword this morning or yesterday.
Did you? Yeah. So I wanted to ring up about this for ages and ages, and just never have. Now, I know that there's lights in lighthouses that have magnification and lenses, but just pure reflection.
They do, don't they? Yeah.
But pure reflection. Have I got one candle now, or have I got the power of two?
Yeah, or just an increase in lumens, even if it's not a doubling. Have you got more lumens now, given that your candle's on your mantelpiece, and how many lumens? How many lumens is it producing?
More light or less?
Have you? Yeah, or the same. That's a really good question. Well, you know what happens now, John.
Of course.
I say it's a really good question, and we both stroke our chins and go, oh, yes, marvellous, fascinating. What a clever girl you've got. And then someone else rings in and makes us all feel stupid for even asking the question in the first place.
I'm stroking my chin now and closing my either eyes
at the same time.
I can see in the same colour.
It's 12:15. Well, bad news for Matthew. This is from Max. Your caller should get checked for a potential cataract. I have exactly the same issue, but only because I have a cataract in one eye only. Oh, my days. It's 12:15.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 17 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Mystery Hour is underway. The clap, the famous clap at the football, and it's at the opening of the Match of the Day theme tune. Where does that come from? What on earth is going on with butterflies? That was basically Graham's question, but we want it from a perspective of evolutionary theory. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Or it must do, otherwise they wouldn't exist. They literally wouldn't exist unless Darwin's wrong about everything. How do we know that everyone sees the same colours that we see? And the number of people who are discovering in real time, live on the radio or off the radio, that they see different colours with different eyes is frankly staggering. Here's a good one from Spitting Cat. That colour thing is crazy, they write. I've never noticed that before. My eyes see colours differently to each other. Mind blown. I've worked with colours all my life. Wow. And the candle question. If you stick a candle in front of a mirror, does the amount of light being produced increase, decrease, or stay the same? Keith thinks he's answered that one, and I think he might be right. But first, Ben's in Stonehaven. Ben, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Ben.
What is the process for assembling a Terry's chocolate orange?
That, my friend, is a brilliant question. Because you mean, do they create lots of different segments and then put them all together, or do they create an orange and then somehow segmentize it?
Exactly.
I haven't had a Terry's chocolate orange for a while. Have you?
I actually haven't. No.
I think they do a mint one these days, but I can't be sure unless Terry's are listening and they decide to send me a box full, and I'll be able to report back on how nice they are. I may give Keith a segment. I think that there is branding on the inside of the segment.
I think there's branding on the inside, and if I can remember correctly, I think there's an orange pattern on the outside as well, which makes it a bit more confusing.
Oh, I don't think it is. I think if there's branding on the inside of the segment, then it must be in individual moulds for each segment, mustn't it? Because I can't think of the machine that would be able to chop it into pieces and also imprint the logo on the inside of the segment.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Are we sure that there is...
How do you join them after?
Well, that'd just be a machine. They're just like a claw. Think of a claw closing.
Yeah, it could be that.
So you put them all into... So there's a mould. They all fit in the mould, and then the mould closes. I like it, though. I want to go definitive on this. Someone who has actually witnessed it is the only answer I'm going to accept. Someone on the Terry's, it'd be in York, I think, or it certainly was back in the day, on the production line of the Terry's Chocolate Orange. Interesting question to ask, Ben, if you're not, I thought you'd be like quite a big eater of them.
No.
Just more interested in the physics than the actual chocolate. There we go. How do they do it then? So it's very similar to the butterfly question, in a way. James is in Chesterfield. James, question or answer?
I believe I have an answer for you, James.
Let's go.
That's the one. Let's Go by the Rooters.
Really? I didn't know that.
To do with the football chant, yeah. It's a 1962 song by a group called the Rooters. And it's the clap, 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 let's go. And it fits nearly everything. And one of the first versions of it was at Liverpool in the 60s for Ian St John.
Really?
Yeah. George Sefton has told the story. The George who's the DJ at Anfield has told the story several times. But yes, clap, 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 St John.
And we reckon that's where it starts. So does anyone? Do you have "Let's Go" by the Rooters ready by any chance on your phone?
I don't know, unfortunately. No, but I know the song. It's like an old 60s surfing tune from California, but it fits nearly everything.
Yes, it does. Harriers, St John Harriers, everything.
And it's gone down the spy rights for Chesterfield FC. Robbie Fowler had it for him. It's gone down a long time over the history at Liverpool FC as well. But it fits anything.
Qualifications?
Liverpool season ticket holder of 30 plus years.
And you've what's the DJ called? What's his name?
George Sefton.
And he's still there, is he? He's been doing it forever.
George has been there since the mid-60s, yes.
What, and he's still doing a shift every Saturday, every other Saturday?
Every home game.
Well,
home game.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to give you a round of applause. You may be subject to a steward's inquiry on this, but personally I doubt it, because George Sefton sounds like a man who knows what he's talking about.
He's written a book about his life as the DJ at Anfield.
Oh, how exciting. What's it called? You'll Never Walk Alone.
No, I think it's called The Voice of Anfield.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because he literally is the voice of Anfield.
He is the voice of Anfield. I love that. Have a round of applause on me, James.
Thank you very much, James.
No, thank you very much, James. Craig's in Aberdeen. Craig, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
So, in winter time, geese fly south down to Africa to get a bit warmer weather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say we get a mild end of winter or spring. They come back up early. How do they know down in Africa that the weather's nice and warm up here?
Hang on. Are we sure about this? They come here early when it's milder?
Yeah, they'll come up here early when the weather's more mild up here, yeah.
What are you basing this on?
I've heard it. I've heard people speak about it. It's actually a question that's been brought up on Johnny Vaughan's radio show. He's actually mentioned it quite a few times.
Never heard of him. Never heard of him. Who's this Johnny Vaughan fellow of whom you speak? So the geese come here earlier?
Yeah, if we've got mild weather up here, they'll arrive early.
So how do they, if they're in Africa, how do they know that it's going to be milder here? And it could be a false premise. It could be a false premise, because I've not heard that before. If it is true, it's a brilliant question. If it's not true, that's the answer, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess. But no, I believe that is true.
I like it. Do you want to hear a fascinating anecdote about geese or not?
Yeah, go for it.
Could you say that with a little bit more enthusiasm?
Please.
There we go. So your pink-footed goose, Craig, is a particularly interesting fowl, and you see a lot of them in Norfolk during the migratory season. And there are a few things finer. In fact, I've got there's some footage on my app. I might play it to you if you're very good. If your response to this anecdote is sufficiently enthusiastic, I might play you the footage I've got of pink-footed geese flying over my head a couple of... I can tell you exactly when it was because the date will be on my bird call app. But, so Holcombe Beach in North Norfolk is or was a site of like a firing range. They used to, because it's a massive old beach, they used to blow stuff up there, the military, the Second World War, like practice blowing things up. And they blew up so much stuff there that the geese, the pink-footed geese that used to visit there, stopped coming, because you would, wouldn't you? It would be quite unnerving to witness that level of explosion, that level of things blowing up. I found it. You're a lucky day. October it was when I was there in 2023. And amazingly, I forget the exact year, but so they just stopped coming. But then they came back. About 10 years later, obviously the war had ended, they stopped blowing stuff up, and so I was always intrigued by how that happened, whether a whole flock kind of just, with some sort of genetic memory, or whether one goose thought, I'm going to go and check out that place we all used to stay, lads, and then come back and say, they're not blowing stuff up anymore, we can all go back there. Well, I don't know how it happened.
Called each other,
I don't know how it works. It's always the mystery hour question, but it's true. And do you want to hear what they're like when there's millions of them flying over your head?
Yeah, right.
Hang on,
please.
wait a sec. I just got to turn that off. Amazing, yeah?
Sounds quite horrible, actually.
Well, I can see that the sound quality, Keith just had some sort of moment. I can see that the sound quality didn't really lend itself to that kind of thing. But anyway, go and check it out in the flesh or the feather. It's magnificent. And of course, I missed a trick. I knew there was a joke there, and I missed it for the autobiography of the bloke who is the voice of Anfield. Should have been, You'll Never Talk Alone. You'll Never Talk Alone. Thank you, Craig. Ben's in Windsor. Ben, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
So it's the answer to the candle question, and so the answer is that there's no increase.
It couldn't be, could there? It's physics that you can't, because it's energy. It's a unit of energy, so you couldn't conjure it up out of. So what actually happens then?
Well, it's called reflection of light. So just like the gentleman who asked the question, talking about lighthouses, you can manipulate where those lumens go,
right,
off any shiny surface.
So that would be lighthouses, and in the days before, proper lighting in theatres when they use candles in little sconces, reflective sconces to direct the light. So you've got a candle, the light is going out at 360 degrees in all directions. You stick a mirror behind it, and you've got the same amount of lumens going out at 180 degrees. So you've got twice as much light going in that direction, but the same amount of light coming out of the candle.
Exactly.
Incredible. Qualifications?
Well, I'm quite pleased with this one, because unlike algebra, this is deep down in my filing cabinet of my physics days at school.
Love it. Well played.
And it's quite nice to suddenly realise that, it was useful.
Something stuck. GCSE or O-level?
A-level.
Oh, you took it all the way to A-level.
I'm GCSE and O-level.
Bit younger. Same here.
Year as you.
Yeah, there we go. Small world. And you took it all the way to A-level, the physics?
Yeah, I did.
Look at that. This is the first time you've used it since?
Yes.
Well, it's got you this. Thank you, Ben. It's 12:27 is the time. David is in Birmingham. David, question or answer?
It's an answer, James. In fact, it's a stupid inquiry.
Go on.
It's the ant question, I'm afraid.
No, I got that one right. Go on. To see, what have you got? Bring it.
Right. You got it partially right in that it is down to terminal velocity.
Yes.
But the reason for the terminal velocity has got absolutely nothing to do with weight.
Oh, mass, I said.
Massive, or even mass.
Oh, okay.
There's a very famous... assuming that you believe in the moon landings, there is a very famous.
Go on.
There is a very famous film of an astronaut dropping a hammer and a feather at the same time, and then hitting the surface of the moon at the same time.
Yes.
Because there's no air. It's down to air resistance, not down to mass.
No, it's both.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
It isn't.
It must be.
The
greater the mass, the more the air resistance.
No, it's nothing to do with mass. It's to do with surface area.
You can tell some people just know their stuff. There's something, a quiet confidence to David that I'm beginning to think I probably shouldn't have challenged. Carry on.
It's the first time I've been called quiet in quite a long time, actually, James. So thank you for that. God bless you.
The confidence that's quiet.
And I'm still one of those weirdos that call up radio stations. So there's a deep cut for you.
Love it. So
it's to do with surface area, not to do with mass. So the reason that ants have a lower terminal velocity than a human would is down to something called the Reynolds number, which is very complicated, but essentially means that as a body gets smaller, the effects of moving through a fluid, whether that's a gas like air or water, would be higher. So the drag gets higher.
So it's nothing to do with momentum.
It's got nothing to do with momentum. In fact, it's quite what it is.
P equals m times v, but that's not relevant to this conversation.
It's not relevant to this. So what it is as a body gets smaller, the effects of the drag outweigh the effects of the inertia, which is what you're talking about, mass times velocity.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, you get to the analogy would be that to an ant, air is more like water is to a human.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with. Well, what are your qualifications first?
Well, like the previous gent, I've got an A-level in physics. I also did a year of aeronautical engineering, which did include fluid mechanics, which this kind of stuff is all about.
So I can't argue with you. Or can I? What about parachutes?
What about parachutes?
I don't know. Michael just texted, what about parachutes? And I'm desperate, so I just said it.
Well, parachutes are essentially there to capture the air and to cause more drag, so it's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
But mass must be relevant to it, because if I've got I'm really struggling now.
You are really struggling.
Yeah, I know, but if I'm not giving up yet, if I've got a parachute, and I'm 100 times heavier, then the parachute stops working. So stop it. Can give David a round of applause.
Thank you very much, mate.
No, thank you very much. Amelia Cox has your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Mystery Hour continues. I think there might be another steward's inquiry on the way, but I'm out of my comfort zone on that. Take me back to chocolate oranges, please. How do they do it? How do they make the chocolate orange? Do they make it in segments and put it together, or do they make a big ball of delicious orangey or minty chocolate and then somehow segment it? Cut it into pieces. The geese question. How do they know? If the geese come back early from Africa, or if they've gone because the weather here is nicer, milder, how do they know? The candle question, very cleverly answered. Does everyone see the same colour when they see a colour? Or how do we know that they do? The clap, we've done that one. That was a really good answer. The butterflies. What on earth would an evolutionary theorist do with a butterfly? How would you make sense of it? Simon's in Twickenham. Simon, question or answer?
Question, please, sir.
Carry on, sir.
Right, so it's another insect-based. My wife died a couple of years ago, and I rebuilt her garden. Right, she was really struggling with it. So I loaded the garden with loads and loads of bee-friendly plants.
Lovely.
My question is, when a bee sticks its head into a flower and collects the pollen, how does it transfer the pollen from its head to its rear legs where the pollen sacs are?
I mean, is it a mystery?
Well, I don't know.
Well, then it's a mystery, I suppose. I mean, that's all it takes. But I mean, I don't want to be on. I don't want to put anyone off their lunch, Simon. But I used to be able to bite my toenails.
Oh my God!
It's amazing the things you discover at boarding school. But I and therefore I presume that the bee can similarly get the leg to the can reach.
Right.
No.
Well, the thing is, I've been watching. I watch a few of them. When I'm doing the gardening, and it goes from one flower to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. I thought, how does it get to from?
Does it ball it up? It balls it up and then sticks it in No, nor have I, frankly. And it's unlikely to have anything to do with my ability to bite my toe. My previous, I don't think I could anymore. Although I've started going today. I've started going to Pilates actually, so maybe I'll be able to bite my toenails again by this time next year.
Oh no!
That's terrible. It's a happy thought, isn't it? Every cloud.
I'm scarred for life, sir.
Every cloud has a silver lining.
Just shocking.
I'm sorry. All right.
That's a laugh out loud moment.
Well, for me at least. It's everyone else I'm worried about. All right, you're on. So how do the bees get the pollen from front to back?
Front to back, yeah.
Great question. Lovely context as well. Thank you, Simon. 12:37 is the time. Christian's in Tottenham. Christian, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Christian.
I love you like a brother, James. Thank you for everything you do.
Bless you, man. Thanks. Me too.
So this one's a bit of a mind melter.
Yes.
But it's the answer to is the colour that you see the same as the colour that I see?
Yes.
So there is no colour out in the real world, out in reality.
Right.
Everything that you see is actually inside your head. It's your brain interpreting what the outside environment is.
Yeah.
So everything that you see there is no colour in the outside world. So the actual question is actually the hardest question that there is. It's called the hard question of consciousness. Because even after all these years that we've been studying consciousness, no one knows what our actual experience is. This
is René Descartes. This is all the cogito ergo sum, brain in a vat, all that kind of philosophy.
You're right, man. Absolutely. And the fact is that no one can know what other people's experience is.
You can't even know that anyone else exists, actually.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's completely subjective. So there might actually never be an answer to that question.
Wow.
Your vision of the external world could be completely different to mine, which is really interesting when you talk about little chemicals like DMT and stuff like that and how they change people's perceptions and hallucinogenics and all that kind of stuff. But that's another. It's the hard problem of consciousness. It's insanely complicated and a real shows how little we know about anything.
Wow.
Yeah. It's awesome.
I love that. Is there a more prosaic answer though? Is there? I mean, if you accept the existence of both colours and other entities, other sentient entities, then is there a more prosaic answer about why two sentient entities agree on what a colour is?
Oh, dude, I don't know. I'm an estate agent. In fact, mate, I'm an unemployed estate agent delivering parcels at the moment. So,
oh, give him a round of applause for that. That's genius. So, but that's not even for the answer. That's for the joke. For the qualifications on how do you know the stuff about the hard? What is it called? The hard question of consciousness.
The hard problem of consciousness. I'm a meditator. I'm just fascinated in consciousness, in what reality is, because it's not what we think it is.
No, it isn't. I remember that from college. That was lovely. Have another round of applause. What a first-class contribution. You gave me a laugh out loud moment there. Absolutely stone cold. That was beautiful. Thank you, Christian. Mick's in God's own country, Kidderminster. Mick, question or answer?
How do, James? I'm all right. I thought you'd like that. All right, Sam, yeah?
I'm great, yeah.
I've got an answer to the geese question, James.
Top man.
Okay. Firstly, as I spoke to the good lady you researcher, said no geese migrate between Britain and Africa.
No, well, that was a mistake from the question. But they do migrate and they do come.
They do, but they actually winter in Britain.
Yes, that's what I thought. I said the question anyway. You tell me everything you know.
Well, yeah, migration essentially sort of thing. It's all to do with food. So basically, your geese are migrating from the high Arctic where they'll breed different species, depending on from Iceland, Arctic Canada or Svalbard or Russia. And so they've got to go. They've got to leave in the winter because it's pretty damned harsh up there, isn't it?
So it's got nothing to do with what it's like here. They're not sitting there in the Arctic and think. So it's all about when it gets too cold there, they head here.
They've got to. I mean, obviously, you consider the Arctic tundra is such a rich place.
Yes, of course.
To breed for them with such a short window to breed because there's that much insect life.
Oh.
flourishes of insect life and for lots of birds. But it's such a brief window they've got, you know what I mean? So it's really short. They've got to get out. Once it starts to freeze, there's no grass, nothing, because it's covered in
so
ice.
They're off. So is there such a thing as a migratory urge as well that's independent of...
Yeah, I spoke to a researcher about this, and this is experiments done, I think, as far back in the 30s. And it is a German term, and it's called Zugunru.
Zugunru.
Don't ask me how it's spelt off the top of my head.
You're smashing it, Mick. Every day's a school day, isn't it? So it's there. We got it all. So the premise of the question was wrong, but you're providing nuggets of knowledge like it's going out of fashion.
Well, migration's an amazing thing, You've got obligate migrants, like many small songbirds, especially swallows are a brilliant example, because you can't have swallows and swifts flying around in the middle of winter catching flying insects, because there's hardly any flying insects.
That's lovely. I'm trying to get swifts in my. I'm trying to get swifts in my box. It's about now you need to start playing the sounds, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, here's a quick test.
Decline.
Here's a quick test. Best places to see geese in Kidderminster. I've got 2. What have you got?
Oh, flipping heck! Well, in the winter, it's rare. You could pop out to Upton Warren.
No, it doesn't have to be in winter. Any time of year, where there's a big enough body of water to attract geese in Kiddie.
Well, lots of places go.
Top two.
Oh my God! Off the top of my head,
I've got 2.
Go to Trimpley Reservoir.
Too fast, not Kiddie.
Oh, Kidderminster, Puxton Marsh.
What about Hurcott Pool?
Yeah, Hurcott Pool.
Broadwaters.
Broadwaters, the pond at Broadwaters. Well. Yeah, but of course these aren't strictly wild geese. They're feral Canadas.
Yeah, they are feral Canadas, and they're an absolute menace, frankly.
Everything can be a menace when people don't want it in the place that they want it, James, can't they?
Mick, you're a poet. Have a round of applause. You're not going to the game on Sunday, are you?
I'm afraid I'm not an Harriers fan.
So it was all going so well, Mick. I'm
a Billabong young man, unfortunately.
Oh, Lord, well, you had a pretty rough weekend as well, didn't you? Have a round of applause to make up for it.
That's very kind of you, sir.
Thank you, Mick. God bless. It is coming up to 1:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I love that. And I thought there was something a bit wrong with the question. I'll have to check in with Johnny Vaughan to see whether Craig has misrepresented what's been going on his show. Andy's in Farnborough. Andy, question or answer?
Morning, James. It's a question.
Carry on, Andy.
Yes. Can my overseas rescue dog understand what British dogs are barking about?
Have you asked him?
I don't speak his language.
Therein lies the mystery.
Yes,
so you think that there's a possibility dogs communicate with geographical specifics?
Yeah, basically, does my dog bark in foreign? Is what I'm trying to avoid saying.
It's not impossible, is it?
No, I don't think so. No,
it seems unlikely. It seems unlikely, but not impossible. All right, you're on. Yeah. So if you bring a dog from a foreign country, will it have any? Thinking about it, it's highly unlikely. Actually, you bring a dog here from a foreign country, will it be able to communicate with dogs that are already here as completely and as clearly as it would if it had been born and grown up here?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:48. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we still need answers to the questions about butterflies, chocolate oranges, bees, and Andy's rescue dog. If you've got those, I shall give you the money myself. Robin's in Ascot. Robin, question or answer?
James, answer.
Carry on.
I don't want to squash any Liverpool butterflies, but I'm a Chelsea supporter.
Oh, she's already gone a bit tasty. Carry on.
I know, hasn't it, Jess? I was taught that rhythm by my father in his Ford Consul in 1958.
Okay, so that...
When I was a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And it is Algerie Française. It was brought to Liverpool by the French PSG Ultras in the European Cup in 1960, and they chanted it all the way through the game, which is where the Liverpool lot picked it up.
Are we doing the same one? Da 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 da.
Algerie Française.
But it hasn't got the first 2 beats.
No, that's what they hooted when they were driving around France to indicate their support
Yeah, but there's two beats missing. It's Algérie Française. Algérie Française is 5 syllables, and the K.
Algérie Française.
Yeah,
Algérie Française.
Yeah, but the one is 7.
The initial one is just hooting your car horn.
Oh, I see.
And then you screamed on the last 5 beats.
Oh, so it's Algérie Française.
Got it. It's a French ultras cry.
Oh, okay.
Which is why it infected British football.
Qualifications?
God knows.
Qualifications. Your dad.
Next to my father. My father told me all about it when I was 5.
And that's a beautiful story, anyway. So you've got yourself a round of applause. But a lot of football folklore is kind of shrouded, isn't it, in the mists of time?
Yeah.
But I mean, your answer is at least as nice as the one that we had. So you can have a round of applause. Chelsea, there you go. That's just for you.
I'm off.
Alex, it's in Reigate. Alex, question or answer?
Hello, I've got an answer.
Thank you, Alex.
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right, mate. How are you?
Good. Yeah, fine, thank you.
Which one is it? Which one are we going to do?
It's the bee question.
Oh, lovely.
So, I think I used to be a beekeeper.
Oh, yes.
And
why did you stop? Did they all fly away?
I used to do it with my dad, but he passed away. So yeah. So, but I will again one day.
Good man. You should.
Yeah, definitely. So they brush the pollen off their head and their bodies onto their back legs, and they've got kind of like little combs on their legs.
Yeah.
And the pollen sticks to their bodies because of I think they're positive. Sorry, I'm feeling nervous. I can't remember the name.
It's only me. Don't worry. Positive charge.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever it is.
Positive charge. That's the word. The charge. Yeah, positive charge. So the pollen sticks to them, and they brush it off into kind of like little pods or sacs on their
brush it with what?
Back legs.
Their wings,
with the with their legs. They've got little kind of combs on their legs.
Yeah. So they gather it anywhere. I don't even think it's there. They cover themselves in it if they can, don't they? They just dive in there like that. They dive in there, get covered in pollen, and then brush it all into little balls and stick it in their sacs.
Yeah. Clean it all off, and they use a tiny bit of nectar as well to help it stick.
Oh, is that what the nectar does best? They like a drink of nectar as well, do they, or not? Or am I imagining
that? They also drink the nectar and then regurgitate it and make it into honey. As well.
I'm hungry now. We'll have a bit of regurgitated nectar. Usually on a crumpet. Qualifications? You observed them?
Ex-beekeeper, yeah.
Ex-beekeeper. I love that. Have a round of applause, Alex.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That's a lovely answer. One of my favourites. Lewis is in Putney. Lewis, question or answer?
Answer, James. Butterflies.
Carry on. And caterpillars, please. And indeed, indeed pupae.
Or larvae. Anyway.
I prefer pupae.
The answer is that basically it's not that special in butterflies.
Really?
It's very common across lots of different insects that undergo metamorphosis. So you see it in mantises, you see it in those ones that live under the ground in the US and come up like every 14 years or something. And there are even mayflies that are around for one day. They suddenly change from larvae in the water for one day. Okay. So that's a very, very extreme thing. But what it is when basically it's a hyper evolution of when the young don't compete for the same resources as the adults. So if you think of a caterpillar, it is basically a leaf-eating machine, and it's just become so specialised at doing that, whilst the adult is obviously much more focused on drinking nectar and mating with its partners and laying eggs. And that's their specialism. And then that's basically how it's hyper-evolved from that, because all insects shed their exoskeletons, and this is just a slightly bigger version of that, where they can, due to hormonal changes, change their setup into wings, which they evolved in the Cretaceous. Oh, no, long before the Cretaceous period.
Who does so the butterfly mates and the caterpillar doesn't?
Yeah.
So the genetic, what's the word for, not the defect, what's the word that you use when the thing that changes, like, you know, the thing that...
The phenotype?
No, they're simpler than that, mate. You're talking to me. Like the aberration or whatever it's called. What's the word you use in genetics for the thing that changed, the thing that makes you different from all the other?
I don't know what you mean.
You do. So 100 organisms are born, and one of them has got the thing that's different that then gives them an advantage.
Oh, yeah, just the advantage, as it were.
No, but is there a word for that? It's not the advantage. It's like the thing, the noun that delivers the advantage. I've gone mad.
The specialisation?
No. Stop talking. Everyone's talking in my ears. Can you stop talking in my ears? I'm confused. Yes, mutation.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Is that correct? God, 100 people have sent me the word mutation. There you go. That's bad on you, that is, Lewis. Everyone else knew what I was talking about. Mutation or variation. Call yourself a geneticist. That's mutation or variation.
Just got back from holiday. My brain isn't working.
That's quite all right. So it would just be the same. There's got caterpillars. But then, so before the mutation came along, what would the organism have been? A caterpillar that could breed?
You get some that can and don't and never evolve into moths and things. So.
No, fine, I love it. Qualifications?
Well, for this one, actually, it's not mine. It's mainly my cousin who has a master's in what's the study of insects? Entomology? I can't remember.
Entomology.
Anyway. Entomology, yeah, that's it. So he has, and we were discussing it once because I have a degree in medical genetics, and so we're boring and talk about that sort of stuff.
That's not boring at all. Look, no, it's not boring at all. Look at the enlightenment you've brought to a much wider audience as a direct consequence. Have a round of applause. Genetic mutation is the phrase I was looking for. I've got a bit of a blind spot on that word. It happens a lot. We talk about it a lot on the programme. I always forget the word. Andy's in Lambourne. Andy, question or answer?
It's a question, James. Actually, steward's inquiry.
That's an answer then.
Sorry, answer, yes.
I'm having a steward's inquiry into your contribution. Yeah. It can't be a question and an answer. Well, maybe it can. We've gone all philosophical again. Which one? It's the philosophical question of colour. Oh, yes. Carry on.
Yeah, so the gentleman previously who answered the colour was going down a very philosophical route, but I think you can do it a lot simpler.
Yeah.
If you look at a solid block of colour, say a nice bright red, look at it, close one eye.
Yeah.
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 And then open the other eye and look at it through alternate eyes.
Yeah.
50% of people, and I've done this because I teach colour theory, will perceive a different colour between their left and right eyes.
Yeah, we got that earlier.
So if you are perceiving colour differently between your own eyes, therefore we're all going to perceive colour differently, aren't we?
No.
Surely.
Yes.
Yeah. If you look at a block of colour.
So so there's two questions here. You're doing the micro question, which is all the different shades of blue or red.
Yeah.
And we're all going to see our own specific shade of red. Yes. Not necessarily. 1 million people might see the same one.
Potentially. But the point I'm making, James, if you're seeing a different perception between left and right eye,
then there must be different perceptions between left and right people.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. That's clever. That's a good use of logic. I mean, it doesn't prove the existence of other people, which was Christian's point. You can't under your analysis, you can't prove that other people actually exist. You could all be figments of my imagination.
But I know you're not a figment of my imagination because I hear you every day.
I know, but I could be a figment of your imagination. You might be a brain in a vat, and I'm just one of the stimuli that is being externally imposed upon you every day from 10 till 1.
I think I need, James, on that point, I think I need to go back and sit in the sun and bake a little bit more because that's been in my little brain now.
No, I know. Imagine what it was like for me when I was doing the show in my shed during lockdown, and then it crossed my mind that I was all a figment of my imagination. I nearly went bonkers. Have a round of applause, Andy.
Cheers, James.
Lovely stuff. And I'm going to squeeze this one in. Tiago is in Bristol. Tiago, question or answer?
I have an answer, James.
Carry on, Tiago.
The chocolate orange question.
Oh, yes.
So they are done as individual segments and then held up in a mold, and it is kind of soldered, I would say. Chocolate's injected in the middle for that core.
Oh, down the spine, down the middle bit, because sometimes...
The whacking bit, yeah.
Oh, qualifications?
I've was a production manager for cookery content. I did a lot of cookery videos, and we did a series of giant things. So we were doing giant versions of everything.
Oh.
And we did like a giant Snickers, a giant Jemmy Dodger, and we were trying to do a giant chocolate orange. In order to do that, we had to reverse engineer it. So I remember looking up and searching all sorts of stuff, trying to figure out how it was done.
That's fantastic. I love that. Did you do a wagon wheel?
No, we didn't. We didn't get around to it. We stuck around more chocolate stuff that was kind of long-shaped.
I'd like to do or a Viscount biscuit, a giant mint Viscount biscuit.
Give me a budget, I'll make it happen.
I could eat my way through that like James and the Giant Peach, Tiago. So, anyway, round of applause. Lovely qualification.
Thank you.
My favourite is Christian, because that estate agent line it could have been scripted, couldn't it? It was absolutely perfect. That's it from me for another day. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits of my show in 60 minutes every day. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4, but now on LBC, it's Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.